Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to some Italian Grand Prix race reaction. Oh, I love Monza. Love watching those cars around that track. And actually, you know, I think that was all right for a race. I quite enjoyed it. It was really intriguing. Lots of different strategies in there. We had action as drivers. Yeah, right, faster cars coming through the field. There's a bit of talk at the end. We had all the talk before about penalties. I've really enjoyed that race. I really did. Maybe you didn't, let me know. But I thought it was a cracking race. But so much to get through, as always, in this stream. Please do drop a like, obviously, and subscribe. All the usual YouTuber stuff, which I'll inevitably spew out of this mouth of mine throughout this stream. And I'll try for those who have complained about last Sunday's stream, I will try and rein it in a little bit this week and not completely lose my rag over gossip and nonsense and speculation. Clip that and give it an hour and let's see where we're at. We are just gonna hop straight into it because I want to try and get these down a bit in terms of flying through the field because it takes too long sometimes. But I'm going to say a very good evening for the first time in a while, actually, to Stuart. Good evening, Stuart. I was just saying I actually really enjoyed that race. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I thought it was good fun, wasn't it? Kind of an intriguing race of mixed strategies. Some people coming through with penalties and a fair bit of action in the midfield, and a newcomer among them. So yeah, lots to think about. And then a perhaps slightly controversial ending, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, for an Italian Grand Prix, which can be a little mixed, a good fun.
I will. I suppose I ought to say this. We will talk about obviously the top two as always, but I do just want to say this: as we sit and stream right now, Nick de Vries still has 9th place. He is under investigation, though. He's been summoned to the stewards for a breach of Appendix L, Chapter 4.2e of the International Sporting Code, driving erratically at 16:15. Now, I've not seen any replays, but I've had a look on Twitter. Apparently, there was an incident between him and Zhou at turn 3, so we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully, from a, oh my God, Nick, you've done such a great job point of view, everything's fine. But obviously, if he has breached the rules, then there could be a penalty there. But maybe just a reprimand. We'll see what they decide to do, but I'll keep an eye out for that one throughout the race. We'll start, though, with Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Just for a change, let's start with Red Bull. It's not like they're winning everything at the minute. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna read his progress down. Read his progress out. So I wrote it down. So he's not on page 1, is he, of my notes, because he started a little bit further back. But by up 3 places by turn 1 lap 2, or up to 3rd, by turn 1 lap 2. Overtook Russell turn 1 lap 5 for P2, and then took the lead when Leclerc pitted under the virtual safety car, and that was basically it for Max Verstappen's race, wasn't it, Stuart? I feel awful again about just saying, well, that was it for Max, but that was essentially it. He came from 7th on the grid. We'll discuss penalties later, don't worry. He came from 7th on the grid. He's leading the Grand Prix. That was it, really, wasn't it? Never looked back, and Leclerc didn't have the pace on those soft tyres to close him doin and stop him late on.
We are truly in the Max Verstappen era, aren't we, right now?
Oh, yes.
This is he's in that kind of unstoppable phase right now. It doesn't matter how far down the grid you start him, it doesn't matter what you throw at him, he will come right back, rising to the top, and definitely challenge to the win, if not take it. And I think we've started having little discussions now about whether he's going to be able to break that record of Sebastian Vettel of 9 wins in a row. I think this is his 5th in a row, so 6 races left, I believe. It's very much on the table.
Yeah, and it's his 11th win of the season, and like you say, we've got 6 left. 13 is the record. I mean, I can easily see him winning at least 3 between now and the end of the season. I just don't see anyone stopping him. And can he make it? It's going to be. I mean, Singapore's going to be tough, because that is the one that's going to bring Mercedes and Ferrari right into play, isn't it? But if he gets quali right on the Saturday and he's on pole, then it's difficult to overtake in Singapore. So he could control it another way. But I mean, the season's on the screen now for everybody that's looking. But Ferrari have won 4 races this year. Red Bull have won all the other ones, and Perez only took 1 of them. So I mean, it's complete domination, isn't it? But I think I keep using this, Stuart. It's your line, because you said it on the stream, but I've stolen it from you. Even though we have this domination, a few races ago, it didn't feel like domination, did it? It felt like we'd had a great fight. But actually, I'm trying to think of the last time we had a true Ferrari-Red Bull fight for the win. Is it really as far back as sort of the first few races of the season?
Yeah, it's been a. I couldn't tell you which race it was, but it definitely felt like a long time since we've seen these two battling. I mean, they definitely are the top 2 of the pack every race, and you could argue, even though they didn't really meet on track at any point because they were on different strategies, that this race was probably the closest we've seen them in a while. And I think something we might get into, Ferrari kind of tied Leclerc's hands behind his back by pitting him so early. It gave him a little bit of extra time with that pitting under the safety car, but left him quite vulnerable on the tyres. So by halfway through the race, or before he made his second stop, it was kind of inevitable that Max was going to win this, really. So they had a good showing here, and obviously with the penalties and stuff, it gave them enough of a head start to kind of at least attempt to win. But really, Max and that Red Bull, I mean, particularly Max, we can't really say the same for Perez, has driven away from everyone else in terms of performance. Yeah, and like I say, the Max Verstappen era has begun, and how long will it last?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, the next regulation change, we've got a little one next year, haven't we, with the floor and diffuser throat height and things like that. But 2026 is the next big change, and that's maybe not going to be that big a change. I know it's going to be fascinating, but if he goes off and dominates from here, then fair play to him. Schumacher did it. Hamilton did it. We've had lots of eras of domination in Formula One, so it wouldn't be anything new. And I felt like saying this last week, but I'm going to say it today because. And I'm not trying to be condescending. I've been watching Formula One 30 years or anything. I'm not trying to be one of those guys, but I think a lot of fans who are maybe new to the sport are sort of going, well, this is boring, but this is, based on my experience, much closer to what Formula One tends to be than what we saw in 21 and 20, isn't it? It's you tend to get a driver and a team that go off and dominate. We do get close championships, don't get me wrong, but you look at the eras we've had in Formula One, there's always a team that everyone wants to beat. It's usually a Ferrari. It used to be Ferrari McLaren when I was growing up. And do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not trying to be that guy, old man about it.
No, yeah, I agree with you. And this is the time now where, I mean, this is sort of year one of Red Bull domination, and you can't guarantee this is going to continue for the next few years, but it's definitely a good head start. And while we don't have a big regulation change coming up, this is year one of a regulation era. So we're expecting development to be pretty rapid. So some of the teams that are struggling this year might be able to pick up the gap by next year. We're going to have a lot of questions, and again, I think next year's already looking ahead to winter testing next year. But that will be a significant thing to watch to see if anyone is able to close this gap. But at the moment, even with what do we have in Belgium? The sort of the changes around the regulations on the floors to stiffen things up and make sure then whatever might have been flexing haven't stopped Red Bull. And I don't know if you discussed this on your stream, but I think Red Bull may have led people on into thinking that was something up their sleeve because they were completely unaffected by that. But either way, yes, nothing is really getting in their way now, are they? So this is the target that everyone is now aiming at.
Like Braun in testing when they kept covering the front wing to lead people astray. I think that was the story back in 2009, and it just drew attention away from the back of the car. Maybe there is that. But I mean, look, even in domination periods, I will say this, but even in domination periods, I mean, 2000 was a good season. 2003 was a fantastic season, very underrated, I think, as a season. So
loved it.
You look at Sebastian Vettel's domination in air quotes. 2010, he didn't lead the championship till he crossed the line to win it. And 2012, we'll look at that finale in Brazil. We had Ferrari in 17 and 18 work and testing it, although didn't quite go the distance with that one. And even if you have a dominant team like Mercedes in 2014 and 2016, what a championship fight between Hamilton and Rosberg we got there. So you're still going to see some great racing. And of course, midfield, crazy tight. I do just want to say on this race specifically, though, one thing that really impressed me actually today with Verstappen, maybe not a total surprise, but yes, he got through the field quite quickly, but he did take those soft tyres a very long way from the start, a lot further than I thought they were going to go. Still had very good pace, which just gave him so many options, didn't it, in strategy, and just made him look ludicrously comfortable. Leclerc had gained that time by pitting under the virtual safety car, but Max soon pretty much wiped that out, didn't he? So I think he's got to get some massive credit for that. We talk about him overtaking and being quick, but he took those tyres a long way. A few drivers actually did today. I was quite surprised how well the softs held up because it was quite a hot day, wasn't it, today at Monza by all accounts. So I'm quite impressed with that one. And yes, he went to the mediums, but then he was able to go on the softs again right at the end. So do you think, I suppose the question that needs to be asked, seeing as Sky won't shut up about it, do you think he still would have won even if we'd had a red flag at the end and a standing start or a rolling start? Because I'll tell you my view, I think don't think it matters what you do. You could start him from the moon and he'd probably still win the race. So I don't think a red flag changes the result at the front. It did. I get the argument that it robbed us of an epic finish, and we all love a last lap shootout, don't we? We often get them in F2 and F3. But I think Max still probably wins that unless he makes a mistake.
Yeah, I think the only possible thing that would have stopped him from winning, because everyone got to change their tyres anyway, and I guess if there's a red flag, you could change your tyres. And the only thing that would have got him is the possibility that under a standing start, Leclerc may have got a better launch and possibly just nabbed him into the first corner. But even then, I wouldn't put it past Max to pass him again down a DRS zone. He had a lot of pace in hand. So I think it was right that Max won, and I don't know if you want to get into the red flag thing now, or after we go through the teams. But my short version is I think, in terms of standard procedure, I don't think we needed a red flag. Now, whether we need to have a think about what standard procedures be, so we can have a last lap or last few laps of shootout, that's a different question. But the rules and the procedures as they stand, I think, didn't warrant a red flag.
I tell you what, we'll do it properly later because people will ask the question. But just for anybody who tends to sort of disappear after we've been through the teams, all I would say on that is that the regulations were followed. We've all, we put up with it all winter. People saying that we need to follow the regulations to the letter of the law. The FIA followed the regulations to the letter of the law, and they're still being criticised. So I sort of think whilst they're the easy target, the FIA, they kind of can't win, can they? So I sort of that's my view of it right now. If the only thing I would say is, as soon as that vehicle comes on the track, it's a bit of a cringe moment, and I think, could we stop that with a vehicle on track? But you've got the minimum, maximum, whatever it is, the maximum time you do. You've got your delta to follow. The safety car was out there; it picked up some of the field, not all of it. I think they were damned if they didn't, and the best thing to do in that situation is to follow the rules, and that's exactly. And the priority is, of course, clearing that car. Ricciardo did stop in not his fault. He stopped in a difficult position to clear that car, so it was always going to be tough. But I just don't think. I don't think it's as deep as some people are making it. Specifically, Sky. I mean, I only get the Sky coverage. I don't know what everybody else was like, but Sky really going in with the whole should it have been a red flag, and you think, yeah. Also interesting that Sky didn't condemn the booing on the podium of Max Verstappen. Quickly, Sergio Perez. We'll come back to that later. Very quickly, Sergio Perez. Interesting race, actually, Stuart. I was watching him sort of halfway through thinking, well, this isn't great. But he or the team were kind of forced into a position, weren't they, with a flat spot. They had to put the hard on, and that allowed him with his pace to undercut that really awkward Ricciardo train, that Ricciardo DRS train. So he managed to get the overcut, like I say, jump those cars. It's actually not a bad race from where he was 13th on the grid to 6th, but I feel like there should have been more. You know, I haven't gone into why or looked into why Perez isn't on the pace of Verstappen, other than the fact that Verstappen is, with respect to Sergio Perez, on another level as a driver. But his pace has concerned me lately, and I'm not going to slate him too much because he has made it back to 6th place with the extra pit stop as well. I feel a bit disappointed again in him this weekend, which isn't my job. I'm not his family. I should stress that point.
Yeah, I've been thinking about Perez a lot for the last few races, really, because he definitely, is a level below where Max Verstappen is. I think Max Verstappen is a click above literally everybody on the grid right now. But I think the question maybe is he where Red Bull need him to be as a number 2 driver? I think he probably is. I think we're sort of in that sort of same zone as how we were thinking about Bottas the last few years, being that Mercedes number 2 driver, where obviously he's a league away from the championship fighting driver, but delivering just enough results maybe to give the team a boost and keep some of the cars behind. But, definitely struggled today. I know he had some trouble with his brakes and stuff, and I think it would be good to see him elevate himself to, well, even to where he was sort of at the beginning of the season. It's really unclear as Max Verstappen seemed to be in a fight with the Ferraris and a little bit with Perez at the start of the season, and in the way he's moved away from people, he has moved away from his teammate as well. So I guess part of me is wondering if actually a lot of this is Max Verstappen figuring the car out and finding an extra half a second or something in the second third of the season. But yeah, Perez definitely hasn't seemed to have found that.
No, and I should stress, I don't think anybody's sitting here saying he should be right on Max's tail and beating him. I don't think shouldn't be claimed about Bottas at Mercedes either, when he was Hamilton's teammate, when they were sort of dominating. They're on another level, Hamilton and Verstappen, aren't they? It'd be like, say, it'd be like looking at Barrichello going, why is he not on Schumacher's pace? Well, really? Why is Ricardo Rosset not on Senna's pace? Not that they were ever teammates, but you get my point. It's different levels of drivers, and Rosset was, wow, yeah, he was another level of driver. But yeah, I've got nothing else on Perez. I think he's done okay. There's a couple of people in chat saying he had his problems as well. He's had the flat spot, like I mentioned earlier. Good news, by the way. I will read it when we get to it. Nick de Vries, just a reprimand. That saves my tweet that blew up. I don't have to delete that one or correct it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's all I got on Perez. Just to read his notes. So pitted, like I say, very early, lap 7. Or end of lap 7, hard tyres, smoking brakes, which was interesting on the right front, A little bit of a brake fire, didn't seem to slow him down at all. The early stop allowed him to undercut under the DRS, like I say, undercut that DRS train. Pitted again, end of lap 42 for the soft tyres. Came out in P7 behind Hamilton and Norris and ended up P6. So sort of Checo's race. As always, like to point out, it's a reaction, not review. So if I've missed the very specifics of his race, I do apologise. And just before I get to Ferrari, I need to do my super chats. Thank you so much to, had quite a few actually. Thank you to Chevron McBean, whose name I love. Am I the only one who's getting bored of this Mercedes-style dominance Max is having? The man could start from outside the track and still win a race. Thank you, Chevron. Go back to Schumacher's domination. I mean, I loved that. As a Schumacher fanboy, I was always going to love that. But I think Martin Brundle picked up on that in commentary, didn't he? That this felt like the Schumacher kind of domination, in that it didn't matter what you threw at Ferrari, what you threw at Schumacher, he was still going to win. So I think we're at that point. Thank you, as always, of course, to Charles Edward Cheese. Good evening, mate. 2 super chats. First one, he said, YAWN, so yawn. Second one says, at least they got the safety car right this time with a sticky out tongue. Thank you very much. You know what to do, chat. Let's try and get this to 500 likes for Charles Edward Cheese. We're at 145. Let's see if we can get that up to 500 for the end of the stream. Muchly appreciated. The prize will be I Won't Sing at the end of the stream. Not that I ever sing at the end of the stream, but I'm going to put it out there as a prize. Thank you as well to Time to Pie for your super chat. Says it was a race, Max too fast, or wasn't a race maybe. Max too fast. Want to shout out Mr. Cheese though, my favourite party animal. Met him when I was a kid. Was scared at first, but all my friends were there and we had a great time. Love the stream as always. Cheers from the US West Coast. Thank you so much for your super chat there. Is he really that scary? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Let's roll on to Ferrari. You've touched on the virtual safety car situation there, Stuart. I think one of these weird ones where some might want to give Ferrari some grief for that, but actually they asked Charles, and Charles said yes, didn't he? And I think had he not, and from what I understand, Red Bull had said to Verstappen to do the opposite, so had Leclerc not pitted, Verstappen probably would have pitted. So actually, maybe that feels like the right call at the time. You've got to... If you get a virtual safety car, you've got to try and take advantage of that. Somewhere like Monza, haven't you, where it's probably a one stop, but it ultimately did actually force them into a 2 in some ways. But I don't think too much criticism for their strategy today, which is nice, unless you're going to go in on them, Stuart, and I can sit back and get some popcorn.
No, I'm not. And especially knowing that Red Bull would have done the alternate strategy on whatever Leclerc did, I do think ultimately pitting that early forced them into a 2-stop because Max was catching them too fast and Leclerc's tyres were pretty old, so they were sort of vulnerable in that stage of the race after Max had done his what was going to be his one and only stop. But to be honest, I like to see Ferrari trying something. They know they don't have as fast a package as Red Bull. They may as well take advantage of the safety car. They may as well try something that works. It wasn't a outrageous strategy that was clearly ridiculous. It could have helped them if there had been another safety car later on in the race. Then that absolutely would have worked in their favor. So yeah, I think they did all that they could, and the process of holding back Verstappen is just a very, very difficult one. So yeah, you can't really point too many fingers at Ferrari in this particular race. I think they got from both drivers really. Quite a lot out of it, despite having that pole position.
Leclerc was fairly comfortable early on. I forgot to unmute my mic. I'm sat here talking, and I didn't unmute it. Leclerc was fairly comfortable early on, wasn't he? I would say, 1.5 seconds clear of Russell, sort of lap 3-4 time. Looked pretty in control. George didn't have the pace, but it just felt like a matter of time before Verstappen was going to come through, and if he hadn't have done it through the pit stop, I think he would have got him on track anyway. So, yeah, a little bit unfortunate in some ways that the green flag came out as he was sort of still trundling down the pit lane. But he said after the race he doesn't think that cost them too much. Just out in front of Ricciardo, though, so that could have been quite costly for him. But I feel like that was about the maximum for Leclerc today. I know he would have wanted more with it being Ferrari's home race, but he got the pole yesterday. He's not done anything wrong today. Strategy was pretty much bang on. It's just a case of we keep going back to him, but it's just a case that Verstappen and Red Bull just too much. So the chance of them beating him today was slim. Without, like I say, if we had a red flag late on, maybe a standing start could have changed. That could have out-dragged him. There is the toe down that straight with a rolling start, so you never know. But I just don't think the pace was there. So second was about all they could get today. But I think Leclerc's had a really good weekend. I'll be glad when the yellow is off that Ferrari, although they can leave the Ferrari name on the rear wing. I really like that. That can stay. But yeah, Carlos Sainz kept track of his moves as well through the field. P14 by the end of lap 3, P10 in turn 1 on lap 6, P8 turn 1 lap 9, P6 turn 1 lap 11. Where did most overtakes happen? P5 turn 1 lap 12, P4 turn 8 on lap 13. Cruise through the field. Did a really good job today, did Carlos Sainz. Was complaining about the team, apparently over team radio, extending his first stint, felt his pace wasn't there. He was told his pace was good. According to the timing screens, his pace wasn't particularly amazing. It wasn't awful, but not great. But then wanted to go long and switch to the softs because they, quote, look really good. Which is great analysis from Carlos Sainz. I love that one. So great drive from him, I think, through to P4. Would he have caught Russell? I'm not sure what his last few laps were. I haven't got a tracker here for his last few laps, but he seemed to be pretty damn quick. So do we think maybe straight fight to the finish he could have caught Russell, or was P4 the maximum for him today? Still amazing from where he started on the grid, of course.
I still got the timing app up, and he was doing about I can't say he was like this every lap, but he was 1.5 seconds faster than him on lap 47 and 8 seconds behind. So probably would have at least come up to the back of him. But he was 15 laps into his soft tires by then. So the sort of the outright punch of those tires might have not been fully available by the time he reached Russell, but it would have been interesting to see if he could have gone on that podium. Otherwise, yeah, totally agree with you. Great race from him. Kind of maximized what was available to him from the back of the grid, really, wasn't it? Yeah, there were points in his race where he was stretching his stint, but I think, I don't think it was too bad, and I think Ferrari actually managed his race pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's quite a difficult race to sum up when you sort of, I thought this is a really good race, and I'm going through the drivers and thinking, well, actually, aside from the fast cars coming through, what really happened in terms of overtaking? It was all strategy, I think, that got me today, Stuart. It was just the varying strategy, sort of 1 and 2 stoppers, some on the soft, some on medium, some trying hard, which didn't really work. But then I like that kind of side of Formula One. I know a lot of people just love the overtaking and the wheel-to-wheel action, but I love that strategy because it's such a huge part of the sport, such an important part of the sport. So it's kind of one of those races today, but I think Sainz was great today. I think Leclerc did a good job, about as good as you're going to get for Ferrari. Max Verstappen was ultimately untouchable, and like I said a moment ago, if you're just tuning in, I don't think even with a late full restart, I don't think there would have been. The only thing would have been that if there'd been a rolling start, maybe the toe down the start finish straight, but then he could have pushed it right to the line and tried to minimize that. Or who nailed the start in F2 or F3 this weekend? Somebody absolutely nailed. I think it was Liam Lawson possibly smashed it out. Just absolutely brilliant start out of Parabolica. Maybe he would have pulled one of those off. So that's anything you'd like to add on Red Bull Ferrari, Stuart? I'll have a look in chat and see if there's anything we really should have mentioned, like something disastrous that we've missed.
No, I think this was a fairly solid and typical example of what we're looking at between Red Bull and Ferrari, probably this season and for the rest of the season. Really, it's good to see Ferrari not completely drop the ball on home turf with their funky livery and race suits. Yeah, not an embarrassment for them, which is saying something over the last couple of months, and I hope to see more of that. And to be honest, a really good race for Ferrari in terms of them looking back towards Mercedes, because we were sort of entering a phase of the championship where possibly could still be on, but it was looking like Mercedes were now actively looking to claw in that gap to Ferrari and take second place. And I think pulling out a larger chunk of points over them, I think, was significant for them this race.
Yeah, we've kind of got multiple tier championship now. We've got Red Bull, and then we've got Ferrari and Mercedes, and then it's Alpine, McLaren, and then it's sort of everyone else seems to be in a, depending on the weekend, seems to be in their own little championship, which is good fun. Yeah, Alex has just asked in chat, Alex Case says, why the mediums for Leclerc at the pit stop? Which is, it's a good point, because I thought they put him on the hards and try and one-stop it, but from what we saw, there were some drivers that were struggling with the hard times in terms of pace. I know George Russell said he didn't like them, but he was actually pretty good on pace, but some were struggling. So maybe flashbacks to a few races ago, Hungary, and maybe Ferrari thinking, oh, maybe we just put the mediums on and go to, what was it, Plan C, the two-stopper. Are you surprised he didn't go for the hards?
I mean, I saw at the time, I sort of was, because he did stop quite early, but I think as we discovered, and as the drivers seem to discuss, particularly in the, what do you call it, the cool-down room, degradation was not high here, and they could push the tires further than they thought. So I think they were quite happy to go on to a longer medium stint than they thought was initially possible. So yeah, I think I think that was fine and worked for them. And I know, as Russell said, wasn't happy on the hard. So I wasn't too surprised once you sort of learned how they were behaving and what you could get out of them.
Yeah, that's fair. So quick look at chat, see if there's anything I need to. We've mentioned Checo's brake fire. I think I said didn't seem to slow him down, so we're good there. Yeah, I think that's about it for them. So let's move on to Mercedes. It will be Mercedes, yeah. Indeed, it is Mercedes. Third for Russell on the podium again. What season he's having, I keep saying it. Lewis Hamilton in 5th place from, actually, where was he? 19th on the grid. Russell started 2nd, finished 3rd, which I think is a really great result for George Russell. Yes, he's lost a position, but he didn't have the pace of Red Bull today. Don't think he would have matched Ferrari outright for pace. Sainz could have nicked it towards the end, but still a really good result. Lewis Hamilton, 19th to 5th. I mean, that's a fantastic drive. And again, another one I think that went quite long early doors, which helped him out. Absolutely helped him out. So it's just come up on screen, so we'll go straight to it. Russell did complain at the start of Leclerc pushing him off the track. I've written here, no, shush. It's my exact phrase. It's turn 1 in Monza. You're never going to get anything for that, are you? I mean, no way. So I get his complaint, but I feel like you just got to expect that when you've got 2 cars side by side going through turn 1 in Monza. So nothing really to add on that one. He was unhappy with the hard tyre, like I say, but the pace was good. Yeah, I bet you'd have slapped him with a penalty, wouldn't you, Stuart? You'd have absolutely banned Leclerc for 10 races for that move into turn 1.
Well, that's what happens when you don't leave the space.
Yes,
Sean. Yeah, that's particularly Monza. That is a classic Monza turn 1 incident. It's very tight. You got 20 cars behind you to keep an eye on in the mirror. It's fine. Russell escaped. He didn't particularly lose anything. He probably felt he lost the ability to attack into turn 2 by being pushed out onto the whatever the runoff, I guess you'd call it. But no, it's a pretty fair and expected. I was going to say argy-bargy, not even argy-bargy, but just, manoeuvring.
We've certainly seen more chaotic openings in Monza, haven't we? It was actually quite well behaved early doors in Monza.
Considering what we've seen in the 4 junior Formula races. Yes, everyone was incredibly well behaved. But yeah, the first chicane and the second chicane have often been causes for damage and retirements, even in Formula One, as people tried to squeeze their way through to what may be the only overtakes they'll make in a race. It's quite hard to overtake around here. So yeah, everyone was patient, restrained, mostly, kept on track. It was good to see.
I think people maybe enjoys the wrong word, but people do like the drama of a first lap turn 1 crash, but we don't see a huge number of them, do we? And I think there's, because I feel like we saw a lot more as growing up. Maybe that's just rose-tinted spectacles of it was always closer and it was always more drama. I don't know, but it's sort of like we've reached a point where the drivers know there's no point taking a massive risk into turn 1 on the first lap, otherwise your race could be gone. What's the phrase? You can't win the race at the first corner, but you can certainly lose it, I think is what Martin Brundle says a lot. So it just feels like, yeah, I'm not even going to debate anymore because there's just nothing in that at all. Lewis Hamilton, like I say, through to P5 from, I keep forgetting his position, from 19th place. Actually quite a difficult start on the turn 1. He cut turn 1 and that dropped him down to last place. Did make his way up to P15 by the end of lap 9. He ran very, very long, eventually running into P6. Nice move on Alonso into turn 1, lap 27 I've written there, and then pitted on lap 33 for the softs from P7, and then just sort of got on with it from there. He was pretty quick, wasn't he, as well? I don't know if you still got the timing in there. He was pretty quick too, and I think him and Perez and Sainz were making that potentially quite interesting at the end. But I think 5th place from the back of the grid, basically, last coming out of turn 1, that's pretty impressive drive, isn't it, in a car that's not really... I mean, it is still faster than those midfield cars, but it's not the Mercedes that perhaps he would have driven through the field in the past, although they did have their issues, didn't they? They used to really struggle to come through the field because they built their car to lead, not follow.
Yeah, and I think they've handily dodged that problem by becoming a bit crapper in a time when the cars got completely redesigned anyway and are easier to follow. So they did also have been struggling here this weekend more than some other races. They did look a bit slower than they have done in, say, Zandvoort, for example. But again, they've proven themselves to be faster in the race than they have been in practice and sort of qualifying. They're definitely faster with fuel and sort of on race pace than they are over one lap. At first, actually, I was a bit disappointed with Hamilton, or I was a bit... he wasn't moving through the field as fast as I maybe thought he would, because we were watching Perez and Sainz kind of charge their way through, but Hamilton actually took quite a long time and quite anonymously was overtaking cars quite a bit slower. Like, it took him, if I can just fast through the timing app, how long did it take him to get to the top 10? About 20 laps. At which point he then got his skates on a little bit, but eventually to get up to P5 was not something I was actually predicting earlier on in the race. I was wondering, is he even going to get into the points, because he was really struggling to make a move on while other cars around him were pulling away. So yeah, I mean, again, good race from him, starting from the back with a car that didn't seem to have a lot of pace on Friday and in practice. I think this is a bit of a win for them, to be honest, for car number 44, getting a solid handful of points once again.
Yeah, he did mention his post-race interviews that he sort of struggled early on. I didn't catch why, because I was setting the stream up, but he did mention that. But I mean, ultimately, he's come through, hasn't he, to P5. It's kind of... I'm looking at the final positions, and I'm sort of like, it was really close, but then I forget there was a safety car, so the field was not split by 8.5 seconds. I was like, what a race that was! I think great stuff from both the Merc drivers today. In a car that was, I think, back to Belgium or post-Belgium, they were talking about Monza was going to be a really difficult weekend. They were going to struggle, and I feared the worst for them. I thought, they're going to... And Ferrari, actually, they were playing down the chances, weren't they? And I thought, well, this could be utter Red Bull domination. Yes, Max did ultimately dominate that race in the end, but I think Ferrari and Mercedes were closer than I thought they were going to be. But then I suppose even when you look at the way the field is spread this season, even if Ferrari and Mercedes have a shocking weekend, they're probably looking at second and third fastest teams anyway, aren't they? So maybe that's the maximum and the minimum they could have done this weekend. But it is, I think we're in for a really interesting final run of the season. I know you were saying about the championship for Mercedes and it being, them going for P2, and maybe that haul of points for Ferrari today makes that a little bit trickier, which of course it does. They've been outscored. But Leclerc second, Russell third, Sainz fourth, Hamilton fifth. Ferrari, Mercedes. We could see quite a bit of that this season, and that could be quite a fascinating fight. And I think we talked about it in DMs, didn't we? Do Mercedes go for the pride as racers of taking that second place, or trying to take that second place of Ferrari, or do they think a bit more time in the wind tunnel next year wouldn't be a bad idea? I'm sure I tend to agree with you, Stuart. I think they're more likely just to want that second place through pride, but also maybe that does play in the back of the mind a little bit. Maybe not so much for Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, but maybe all those guys at the factory going, oh, come on, guys, I could do it a few more hours next year.
Yeah, I think they are absolutely going to go for the sporting prize over a few more hours in the wind tunnel or on the CFD machine every time. And I don't think you can even, slow the drivers down in that sense. And I mean, thinking about it, like, Mercedes are fighting with Ferrari, but also they are fighting with Perez. And even in this race, before Perez went for that final stop, Lewis Hamilton was intriguingly reeling him in, and in what looked like a pace that would ultimately lead to him having to overtake him on track. And then Perez decided those hard tyres were not great to take to the end of the race and sort of dropped out of that fight and behind Hamilton, which is where he ended up staying because the safety car neutralized the race. So there's quite a lot for Mercedes to gain by continuing to push, because while they're sort of in that behind Verstappen fight, they are among the Sergio Perez kind of fight still.
Yeah, I just look at the Drivers' Championship as you said that one. You've got Leclerc 219, Perez 210. Then you got Russell on 203. I mean, Russell's got a great shot of being runner-up in this championship if he carries on with this consistency. Carlos Sainz 187. Lewis Hamilton a little bit further back in sixth on 168. That's actually a stat I wrote down. Lewis Hamilton now mathematically cannot win this year's World Championship, and I believe that's the first time. And this was done very quickly before the stream, so if I'm wrong, I'm so sorry, Hamilton fans. But I think this is the first time he's been out before the finale since 20... No, I'm trying to think when it... 20... Oh, no, that can't be right. It can't be because he was in it in the finale.
13? Are you...
It could be 2013. Yeah, 2013. It would be, wouldn't it? Because 2014 he was, 15 he was, obviously, because he won it. 16 he was still there versus Rosberg. 17, 18, 19 he was. 20 and 21 he was. So...
it's a banger tweet. You should tweet that.
It's 2013, isn't it? It will be 2013. So that's staggering. Absolutely staggering. So we are basically... where are those straws for me to clutch? The title fight is between Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, George Russell and Carlos Sainz. Max can wrap it up in Singapore, by the way. Seen a few people say it. I think he needs quite a lot of luck. But maybe still got those ties to Honda. Won't be bad in Japan. Would feel quite traditional, actually, to win it in Japan. Weirdly, in my head. So go for it. There you go. Yeah, so...
Singapore's not a massive long shot because it's a long race. People get tired.
Yeah.
It's a fast race between the barriers. Having Leclerc retire is not absurd a thing to happen.
Yeah, it's a physical race, isn't it? Hot as well. Can be quite hot. So I've not done title permutations. I tend to wait until it's actually more likely to happen. But I mean, who knows what Ferrari can do with strategy or anything like that. So yeah, McLaren. Let's roll on to them. Let's get through the field. Then we could do some proper waffling about all sorts that's gone on this weekend and around F1. Lando Norris P7, Daniel Ricciardo DNF. I'll talk about Norris in just a moment. I do just want to say Ricciardo DNF does not do his race justice. I think that is his best performance in that McLaren in a while. Not only was he head of DRS train 1, as I've called it, the Ricciardo train, he worked brilliantly with the team. Unless I misheard it, he worked brilliant with the team, keeping Gasly behind, which allowed Norris, who was running long, to jump him, which would have worked had McLaren actually bothered to do a quick pit stop. He had a great shot. I think Ricciardo had a fantastic race today and just very unlucky with a reliability issue at the end. I mean, some might say, wow, I mean, how far has Ricciardo fallen that that's considered a great race? But when you consider where he must be with confidence, where he is with that car, I think he can be very, very happy with that one. And big weekend for McLaren. Norris P7, like I say, could have been more without that slow stop. We will never know, of course. It was 5.1 seconds in the end, a slow right front, or at least the light was slow going green. Big result for them today, wasn't it? Big points. Alpine not scoring. That battle for P4 is kind of back on now. It's still a bit to close that gap, 125 versus 107, but you know, they're back in it if they're ever out of it.
Yeah, need a couple of more races like this to solidify it. But fun. I mean, this continues what is a funny old season for McLaren. Sometimes they're sort of present and there, and they seem like they got pace, and sometimes they're nowhere and struggling. And I think Daniel Ricciardo in particular, in general, hasn't helped particularly with that, and they probably would have a few more points. But you're right. This race, he had the place, he had the pace, he worked with the team, he was doing well, and it could have been a solid haul of points if they managed to get both cars to the end and done some successful pit stops. But as you say, versus Alpine, this is a significant little result for them. Just need a few more of these races, and it's very hard to predict when those races might be. It could happen in Singapore, or they might have another terrible one. They could ace Japan. So very hard to predict. They've had a very strange little season. And I think if I were McLaren, I'd definitely be shifting my focus to next year now, despite that tight fight with Alpine. I think they'd definitely be looking forward more than in the present.
Yeah, just looking through Norris's race specifically, bad start. To be fair, did have a bad start. Fell down to, I think, was he 6th? I think he dropped down to, but that did compromise his early race because he was stuck in that DRS train behind Ricciardo, and that was one hell of a DRS train. So he was stuck in that one for a little while, and then that's why McLaren, I think, played a blinder with the team game. I think it was bang on. I was just going to say, they're having a weird season, aren't they, McLaren? I've seen a couple of people chat saying they're kind of up and down, but I find it very difficult to predict McLaren race by race. So you some weekends you expect them to have a really difficult one and they excel, and then another weekend you think, well, this is their weekend and they're dreadful. So it's really odd season for McLaren. I can't work it out, to be honest. But let's have a quick look at what we've got here. Did make a mistake at turn 1 at one stage in the race and cut the chicane, and that allowed Alonso through. As I already said about the overcut, he tried that one but failed with the slow pit stop, 5.1 seconds. We'll see. We will see what happens in the championship. I mean, chat, maybe I'll do a poll in a second, but do we think that McLaren can overhaul that gap to Alpine, or do you think Alpine have just about got enough? I'll just remind you of it. Alpine 125, McLaren 107. It's at the front, that's a very close gap. In the midfield, it is still close mathematically when you consider we've got quite a few races still to come, but you're not scoring top end points, are you, in the midfield? So it takes a little bit longer to close that gap. Obvious statement, I know, but yeah, I think McLaren are very happy with that. Again, helped by the fact that Alpine haven't finished today. We'll get onto Alpine in a moment. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P8, and Yuki Tsunoda, P14. I think Gasly had a very good race, to be honest with you. Kind of got stuck behind Ricciardo, didn't he, for quite a while again in that DRS train. Drove very nicely. Nice battling with Ricciardo as well. Did get a move done, or did go for a move at the first chicane. Locked it up. I think that was on lap 14. Locked it up, went straight across the chicane, took the position, had to let Ricciardo go. I know he'd already got through, but he was braking very late, locked up. Did the right thing there. Did have a slow stop himself, apparently, the pit stop, so maybe he could have done more today, but not surprising the AlphaTauri pace, given how well they did to come through the field in Spa. But that feels like, I'm just going to have a look, actually, Stuart. Just have a look at the results. That feels like their best result for quite a while. And you're all going to tell me they were brilliant last weekend. So 9th at Belgium, 8th today, but that's the only 2 races they've scored points at since Azerbaijan, amazingly. 5th place in Baku, and they hadn't scored until Spa, and then they score again here. What a weird season they're having. Sorry, just look at their results.
Yeah.
You think of where they were last year, that's quite baffling, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they were sort of like this incredibly strong, small midfield team that were punching well above their weight. That's sort of how you thought of AlphaTauri. And this year, they've just they've struggled, and they just haven't had the pace you kind of expect them to have. And I feel, particularly bad for like Pierre Gasly, who I think was shining quite brightly in the last couple of years at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso, where he could really demonstrate his skills and his sort of post Red Bull renaissance, and now has not been given the package to do that. And you can sort of see why there are very strong rumors about him shifting seats to perhaps Alpine or somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I was quite surprised by their pace today, considering where they've sort of been. I was quite glad they're able to get a couple more points on the board. Very interesting that Pierre Gasly was almost in the clutches of Nick De Vries before the safety car cord was pulled. De Vries through actually taking advantage of some Verstappen lapping through them. Very cannily pulled up behind Gasly there, and maybe could have had that place too. But yeah, Gasly got the full 8 points. I think an extra point because Ricciardo retired in front of him. But yeah, I think as with McLaren, points they valuably need. Is that a phrase? Valuably, they definitely need these points.
Sounds right.
Very valuable points they need, having had a bit of a duff season.
Yeah, I think as well we've got on the Gasly thing. Sorry, I was halfway through drinking. Not alcohol. I'm not getting drunk on stream. We saved that for Christmas. But I think just on the Gasly thing and the De Vries thing, De Vries was close because Gasly had kind of, I think it wasn't Gasly. De Vries had kind of because Zhou had let Max through to lap him and lost quite a lot of time to De Vries. De Vries seemed to absolutely smash it in the way he let Max through, and then Pierre lost a lot of time as well being lapped, didn't he? And that just allowed De Vries right in there. So there was a threat there to Gasly. But that was, I mean, we'll talk about De Vries in a minute, but that was such a fun little DRS train. I know people say that gets boring, so just following each other and nobody can get past, but there's always the risk in that midfield that something is going to happen, which keeps it nice and tense. But I think Gasly, great drive today. Best result for him since, which would have been, I think he was the one with Spa, wasn't he? Yeah. His best result since Spa. So, yeah, moves up into 11th place in the championship. Not much more to add on him. Yuki Tsunoda, bless him. I've got pitted end of lap 19. I've not got much on Yuki at all. Finished 14th in the end. Did make 2 stops. Yeah, a bit of a weird weekend for him. At least he's got rid of those reprimands, though. So no more penalties there. But he's not far off a race ban, is he? Which is slightly concerning.
Yeah, hopefully he can keep his keep himself under control. And although you got to wonder if AlphaTauri are like looking for that, so they can just slot someone into that seat and give them a go and see how that goes without stirring anything up. But yeah, anonymous race. Don't have too much to say about him, really. After all that, if we do get a race ban for him, he'll be the first Formula One race ban under these penalty point system that we got.
Yeah. Have you got any notes on his race or anything you've got in front of you that might? I'm just thinking of the Yuki fans who are like, oh, Shaw's going to talk about Yuki now. And I'm like, he pitted on the end of lap 19 and made a second stop later on.
No, I mean, nothing. You basically didn't see him at all during the race, really. And while you were talking briefly about Gasly, I was zipping through the timing app just to see if anything of significance like shot out at me. And yeah, just a little bit of a quiet, anonymous race really from Yuki. There's not much left to report unless and chat aren't exactly brimming with enthusiastic remarks to say about him either. So.
Free says Yuki had a good race with Hamilton in the beginning, which is fair. I mean, there was also I think he got caught up in what I called DRS train 2 behind Magnussen early on, which probably compromised his race because I do think the pace is there in the AlphaTauri on a track like this. So maybe if he got clear, I mean, he didn't get clear of that, so you know, it's silly really. I'm just trying to see if there's anybody. Why is no one discussing Yuki's recent form, says Nick Surface. We can do that later, mate. We can go on about Yuki if you like, because there are question marks about... Because he's not signed for next year, is he, Yuki? Officially, formally, whatever the phrase they use. So I guess it's kind of going to depend on what happens with Gasly. They're not going to let Gasly go and then let Yuki go because they've not got the drivers to put in that seat, have they? They're kind of struggling to fill Gasly's seat if he were to go to Alpine, which apparently is sounding less and less likely. But if he was to go to Alpine, then who are they going to put in there? Because they're clearly not very happy with their junior drivers at the moment. They're looking at Colton Herta. Apparently that's now looking less likely. He's not got the dispensation, if you like, from the FIA, or they're still working on that behind the scenes. A lot of team bosses not keen on the idea because the rule's there for a reason. So why are we messing about with it? But you know, that's a story for another day. But I guess his form of late, Yuki, has been disappointing in what... And I know this is silly, but it doesn't feel like he's had a disappointing season. But his last results... so he scored a point in Spain, but then he's 17, 13, DNF, 14, 16, DNF, 19, 13, DNF, 14. That said, Gasly's form isn't much better in terms of results, and of course, as we know, the results don't always tell the full story. But yeah, do you think there's some concern there? I guess is the question. Since we've not got much on his race, Stuart, super quickly, do you think there's some concern there for Yuki's future?
I think possibly he's not. I don't think there's he doesn't stand out as a terrible driver or anything, but he's not really standing out as a shining light. And so I think when Red Bull want to start moving people up and trying out their junior drivers, I think he's the first person who will have to make way for that. I think in terms of his seat being safe, I think part of this we have to wait to see what how the ripple effects from Alonso's defection to Aston Martin play out, because that certainly freed up a hell of a lot of seats and speculation across many teams. And maybe if Gasly moves on, AlphaTauri will want someone they know at least in one of their cars. It's hard to say. I don't feel like he's yet at a sort of Latifi-esque point where it definitely seems like that seat needs to sit someone else in it yet. But if he does get replaced, I wouldn't be massively surprised. Like, he's fine. He's fine, but I don't think he's setting the world on fire right now.
I think that's fair. I think a 6 race as well, isn't there? Maybe picks up a bit, but I think even if Red Bull looked at him this season and went, he's not had a great one, I think what could ultimately keep him in that seat is just a lack of options. But then Franz Tost has said in the past that he thinks that a rookie driver, needs 3 seasons. So it sounds like he'd like to keep Yuki for another year. A year to learn the tracks and the sport, a year to sort of bed in, and then a year to take all of that experience and deliver the best season you possibly can. So maybe we're looking at that. I mean, we shall see, of course. Obviously, we'll see. I think I am going to do this as a new timestamp, because I think we need a few minutes on Williams, which, by the way, is lovely. I'll do super chats quickly first. It's so nice to be able to talk about Williams nice and early in the stream, or early-ish. Just do some super chats. Thank you very much to Kaylin Douglas, who says, when are either of you guys next planning to stream F1 Manager? You've got me hooked. Everyone should check them out, by the way. Lots of fun. Thank you very much. I'm not sure. Probably next week for me at some point. I know that's really specific, so that'll make your day. And I think you said somebody's chat, Stuart, you're planning on doing some more soon. Great game. Really enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And doing it on stream, I think, is it makes it twice as fun, just having people involved to shout at you.
Oh yeah, I'm terrible. We've had a couple of great finales. If you've not seen them in my races, some real edge of your seat, Sean having a breakdown kind of stuff, which is great fun. I'm going to try and read this. I'm going to very quickly. Urban Abyss 43. I'm being so thick today. Thank you very much for your super chats. Is any Herta news? Need an American driver? Question mark. I was just saying about Herta, looking less and less likely. I've not seen anything confirmed or dismissed just yet, though, so maybe we'll get some. We've got 2 weeks with absolutely no racing, and then we're back in 3 weeks for Singapore, so actually there's a bit of time now for teams to have a think about this, so maybe we'll hear something in the weird gap we've got because a race was not replaced. So quite weird, really. Actually, it feels quite odd. It feels like we're going for a summer break again, but we're not half a summer break, so hopefully we'll hear something soon. I don't think personally F1 needs an American driver, if I'm being honest. But I think Liberty Media would like an American driver. That's why I suspect there might be a few people at FOM leaning on the FIA. But ultimately, it's the FIA's decision, isn't it? So we'll see. And I don't know, just changing my name. Thank you so much for your super chat as well. It says, I don't think I've seen you for a while, actually. I might be wrong. You might have been in chat the other day, but hello again. It says, why did Ferrari box Leclerc after Max pitted first? If racing got going again, no way he was overtaking Max. If they don't pit, they keep track position at worst. And if the race finished behind a safety car, as it did, you win. I don't think Leclerc... I think Max had the gap, didn't he, Stuart? If I've read that question correctly. I think Max had the gap. So even if Leclerc hadn't have pitted, he would have still have been behind Verstappen that second time.
Max definitely had the gap. There was... by the time they were around to the pits, it was a 22-second gap, particularly with the slower pace they were going, and that with the safety car delta, the pit stop is well within that time. So, and actually, Ferrari's radio also confirmed that. They said when Leclerc questioned about pitting, he said, "We don't gain a place by not pitting." So, yeah. So, I guess kind of going back to Zandvoort with Lewis Hamilton, they got quite a lot of stick, Mercedes, for not pitting Hamilton, but actually they went for the win, and maybe that's what Ferrari were thinking. Just, we're not going to lose anything, but we're also not going to gain anything, so let's just try it and see what happens. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much been the Ferrari strategy all race long, really. Just, let's try something.
It could be worse. Let's go for Williams then, I mean, look, I'm grinning from ear to ear. I was watching him in the timing screens, Nick de Vries. Everyone, if you follow this channel long enough, you know I love this kind of story. He, nowhere near the car. He had his FP1 with Aston Martin, having coffee with Toto Wolff, gets a phone call. Alex Albon has appendicitis, won't be able to race. Get down here. And then he has I think he didn't go out to about 35 minutes left of FP3, so he had half an FP3 session in that car. Then in qualifying, puts in, I think, a cracking lap for P13. All the penalties applied put him P8. And then he comes through in his first race, and it's P9. I mean, what a drive. And I'll just, first things first, I should say, he's okay. I've seen him tweeting. He's been quite funny on Twitter. Get well soon to Alex Albon. Hopefully back in time for Singapore. I've never had appendicitis. My mum had it and actually was, well, let's just say very, very ill with it. So I know that it can be quite dangerous, but he's okay, which is good news. I think he's had surgery. He's certainly had treatment for it, so that's good. But on Nick de Vries, what a drive. I'm going to read the good news for anyone who's just tuning in and wants to know. He was under investigation for erratic driving, but the stewards have decided that he will just get a reprimand from that. I'm going to read what they say. So the stewards heard from Nick de Vries, the team representatives, and have reviewed video, audio, and telemetry evidence. The usual line. The driver advised after the second lap under the safety car, he was unsure about why his display was showing that he was at risk of being under the delta time. At the same time, he was dealing with brake issues and was in radio contact with the team over the issue, so did not get any advice from the team in relation to his delta. He therefore reduced speed in order to remain above the delta time. The stewards took note of the fact the driver was a last-minute replacement for the usual team driver, and had driven this car for the first time in FP3 at this event. Therefore, in mitigation, the stewards decided to impose the penalty of a reprimand instead of a higher penalty. So that's actually, before I talk about his race steward, that's really interesting to see that the stewards have sort of said, look, you know, if you, I'm putting words in the mouth here, but if you'd have been in this car all season, we'd probably have slammed you a bit harder with a bigger penalty than that one. And actually, because it's your first time in that car and you're a last minute replacement, we're going to just give you a slap on the wrist, but just be warned next time you might not get away with it. That's interesting. I don't think I've seen that before.
No, I don't. Yeah, I definitely haven't seen that to my knowledge, but asking me to remember all the stewards' decisions over the
God.
But I have noticed. I don't know. I don't know if it's just something I'm noticing or something that's actually happening. But the stewards have been quite articulate and spent some time describing and explaining a lot of their decisions in the stewarding reports they put through, which is quite good to see. And in this particular case, it's, you know, here's an explanation, a human explanation that goes into some of the nuances of why they decided just to reprimand Nick in this case, which I think probably fair enough, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's fair enough and nice to see. I mean, he did hop into that car on the Saturday, having driven a completely different car on the Friday, and being part of a third team for the rest of the week. So, you know, yeah, simple mistake, I think.
Yeah.
Having said that, driving erratically, I think, is something that his fellow Formula E drivers would level at him across the board, I think.
He stayed P8. I was just going to say, stayed P8 at the start, which, again, considering first race, no time in that car, he could have been very cautious into turn one. He clearly held on to P8, which was great stuff. I think he did a fantastic job, actually, staying within that DRS train, just clinging on to, I think it was either Alonso and Norris or Norris and Alonso, whichever order they were in, doing really well, holding Zhou off. He was in the DRS train. That was helping him with his pace. We know that Williams is very slippery in a straight line anyway. Pitted end of lap 19 and put the mediums on, and I thought, oh no. But he took them to the end of the race on the mediums. I don't think anybody... I wasn't expecting him to. I thought he'd be in again for some softs at least, or maybe another set of mediums, maybe scrubbed or new, whatever. But did a great job on there. But he did get black and white flag for track limits, is I suppose a mark against his name. But I mean, he got that quite early in the race and didn't get a penalty, so he learned from that, which is good stuff. But absolutely blown away by his performance. I know that Alex Albon has been doing a great job in that car. I understand it, and I know that he was, you know, fortunate, if you like, because of the penalties, but I'm not going to use my usual line. You know what's coming. You can work it out yourself, but I think I'm trying to even put a foot wrong, apart from getting a black and white flag and then getting a slap on the wrist for erratic driving, which sounds like he was dealing with issues anyway. I think about as close to faultless as you'd expect a rookie to be. I mean, I've got nothing but praise for him today. And what I will say, and if you think I'm being too harsh, feel free, but I think the fact that he's been in that car 16 races and was in it all weekend, I think that was utterly humiliating for Latifi, if I'm being honest. I don't want to go hard on him. People talk, oh, he's a lovely guy. Yes, he's a lovely guy, but goodness me, he should have been grabbing that team by the scruff of the neck this weekend, and he should be the one up there in P9, not Nick de Vries, who's barely driven it.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely a man fighting for his seat right now, isn't he? And he hasn't risen to the challenge in the way that maybe Mick Schumacher has done more. But I mean, I was once when de Vries got called up, the announcement got made on Saturday. I was expecting, I was fully prepared for him to sort of come last in qualifying, and I would have been like, guys, don't read too much into this. He's only just been called up. It's in a Williams. It's fine. And then for him to sort of tootle around sort of at the back, maybe bother the Astons or something. But no, he qualified well. He was elevated by penalties, and he made the most of that and drove faultlessly. Whereas, I mean, I've been thinking this about Latifi for many races now, but he's just, I think Williams, despite obviously probably it's a toss up between them and Aston, depending on what weekend we're on. But the back of the grid team, I think he's dragging them down a bit. I think if we had a couple of Albons in that team, or if we had an Albon and a de Vries in that team, I think they would have had a fair few more points, perhaps, or at least would have been closer to them. I think he's just not really showing himself, and I think it's been very clear that this is his last season. Probably in Formula One. I can't imagine him being drafted into AlphaTauri or something next season. Yeah, I can't imagine how he's feeling right now to have someone just shoop in and humiliate him in his own car.
I mean, I put the tweet out. De Vries, 1 race in that car, 2 points. Latifi, 16 races, no points. Says it all. I know stats don't always tell the story, but I think in this case, you could argue it does. It'd be different if 16 races each in that car and he's only just scored points. We'd probably have a different conversation, but that's just awful for Latifi. What I will say, I've seen some people talk about, do Williams put him in that car for the rest of the season? The answer to that is they could if they wanted to, but I do not expect that to be the case for a couple of reasons, but also really the main one being that Nicholas Latifi is paid for the season. And I know Williams financially are not in the peril, if you like, they were a couple of seasons ago. They're still going to take that money and they're not going to want to pay that back. So Latifi's paid up for the season. He'll be in that car, I would imagine, until the season's over, unless something really surprising happens. But Nick de Vries has done everything. He can't do any more than that. He cannot do any more than that to stake a claim for either that seat or a seat in Formula One. Not only obliterated his teammate with no time in that car, he also picked up points, which Albon is the only driver to have done that in a way. I mean, what's Alex Albon done? I mean, Alex Albon's best result is 9th. He's matched that in a race. I'm not going to go Alex Albon, by the way. That's what he's done today, and I can't see why he's not in the Williams conversation now. They're surely at least considering him after that. I did see someone in chat saying that he may have done a too good a job, and maybe now other teams like Haas and Alpine might have gone, oh, hang on a second. It's a thought.
Yeah, and he's out of contract with Mercedes, so he'd be available. Yeah. And, if I were Nick de Vries, I'd be snapping at anyone who'd grab me. And he's pushed Nicholas Latifi into 21st place in the championship, which is where I believe Mazepin finished last year out of 20 drivers. The only reason he's ahead of Nico Hülkenberg is because he's had more races and managed to get a few 15ths in. He hasn't finished higher than Nico Hülkenberg at any point.
No, Latifi's best result 12th, Nico Hülkenberg 12th in 2 races.
Yeah.
That just says it all, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to stick the boot in. I think it's quite obvious that he probably shouldn't be in that car next season. Some would argue he shouldn't be in it now, but he's paid up, so he'll be there to the end of the season. But Williams actually got a tough call to make because they're looking at Logan Sargent. My view of Sargent is I'd like to see him get a chance, but I feel like he could do with another year in F2. It's kind of my view on Sargent. Really good driver, lots of potential, but maybe another year in F2 to hone those skills and then look at maybe Williams in 2024 is kind of how I feel about that one. And if that's the case, then do you take a punt on De Vries if you've got a young driver lined up?
I mean, I know I would if I was a team manager, which I am in the computer game world. I think De Vries is your more solid bet for next year, and then I don't know, move Sargent into a more solid third driver development role and see what shakes out. Again, we're still waiting for this whole driver market thing to kind of figure itself out, which could take a while yet. I mean, it'd be quite funny if Alex Albon went back up to AlphaTauri again or something, which won't happen. But
no,
yeah, I mean, I would grab Nick De Vries for if I was Williams team boss for sure.
Yeah. The other thing, I will just anybody wondering, Felipe Drugovich, by the way, first of all, congratulations to him and to Martins as well for wrapping up the titles today, F2 and F3. Drugovich apparently looks like he's off to Aston Martin as a reserve, so that's something. But I still think, look how he's done in F2 this season, and he's not even in the conversation. That seems crazy to me. He's not fluked it, has he? He's just been very, very good and very, very consistent. And everyone's sort of going, oh, what about Teo Pourchaire? What about Logan Sargent? And you think, what about Felipe Ruddy Drugovich? I know you've got to have backing in F1, but it's going to be such a shame if he never gets an opportunity when lesser drivers have. But we can do silly season talk another day. I know we've got an interesting silly season stream planned for the winter, haven't we, Stuart? Which could be quite a laugh. So quite interesting, which I'm looking forward to. So tease you with that one. Who have we got next? Let's get through these then. Alfa Romeo. I don't know why I was confused by the phrase Alfa Romeo there. Zhou, 10th place today. Great to see him in the points again. Bottas 13th. A bit of a weird one for Bottas today. I've not got much on Zhou that we haven't gone over with Albon and others. He was on the back of that DRS train. That's the phrase we've said a lot in this. Was very close to having a go at De Vries. There's a really nice little scrap there. De Vries did great defensively. Zhou was trying his best. Got kind of mixed up a little bit around the being lapped by Max Verstappen. Like I say, lost a bit of time. But I'm really, really pleased for Zhou to see him up there. He's been one of the unluckier drivers on the grid this year. So to see him back in the points for the first time since Canada, I think. Yeah, Canada. Just look at the thing. Yeah, Canada. Yeah. I think that's fantastic for him. But Valtteri Bottas, I've got a bit of contact with K-Mag Turn 1, Lap 1. I don't remember seeing... I was trying to think. I legit cannot remember seeing a thing of Bottas today, apart from at the start.
Apart from when he buffed K-Mag. He was... And he lost a bit of pace after that as well, so he wasn't really doing much after that initial contact. But Zhou, though, I'm very, very happy to see get a point. In fact, and I tweeted this, and some of you may consider this blasphemous, before Ricciardo retired, Nick De Vries was in 10th and Zhou was behind him, hassling him for that 1 point. And I was very much like, Nick De Vries is like the story, the young lad who gets parachuted in and scores a point. But also Guan Yu Zhou deserves points, that deserves more points than he has because he's had such bad luck on his side, and it'd be really nice for him to get a point. So I'm quite glad. I mean, I love Ricciardo. I'm not glad he retired, but I'm quite glad they both managed to get some points for their efforts today, and that Zhou can sort of get some more on his tally because he should have had more than what he's got.
Yeah, you've just said that. I was thinking, De Vries is the story, so you want him to get the points. Zhou's had a lot of bad luck this season, so you want him to get the points. But in order for that to happen, we have to have a driver who really could do with a break this season, retiring from the race, having one of his best weekends of the season. Isn't that just so Formula One? I've got no disrespect to Valtteri. I have nothing on him. If you've got anything, please say in chat if I've missed something. I will come to that. But just on Zhou, I think it's difficult to overtake at Monza anyway, isn't it? I said in the preview, a lot of people think it's easy. But it isn't, and especially if you get caught in a DRS train, it becomes so difficult. But I honestly thought that when Zhou cruised up to the back of De Vries, I thought, well, this is where that experience Zhou has had in the car this year was going to tell, and he'd be up the inside, and that would be that. But I think, how can I word this? Do you give credit to De Vries for his defense, or was it that Zhou maybe wasn't ruthless enough in the attack, or was it just that it is so bloody hard to overtake at Monza sometimes when you get stuck in that DRS train? Obviously, DRS being less powerful in Monza because of the low drag.
Yeah, I think it was definitely tricky for Zhou, and I don't know if we would have got to a point where he would have been able to get alongside or actually have a proper overtake attempt or a dive or a DRS pass on a straight or something. But part of me is quite glad it never got to that point, and we didn't see old elbows out De Vries that we've seen a few times in Formula E. It's nice that for the most part he seemed to have quite a clean, solid fairy tale race. But I mean, we haven't. Maybe I mean, a lot of this is my memory, like in my old decaying age. But I don't remember. As far as Zhou has had a good, solid season in terms of pace and performance, luck hasn't been on his side. I'm not sure I can recall him being a killer overtaker yet. I don't know if you agree with that, or if I'm just missing sort of things from that through his season. So I'm not sure if I've seen that side of him yet.
Off the top, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an epic movie's made. But I wonder if some of that is rookie season. Let's not stick the car in there just in case, because he wants to be in F1 next year. Do you know what I mean? Just honing his racecraft a little bit. I'm sure someone in chat will throw something in there, but no, I totally know what you mean. I was looking at Tho22 says, I'm sure Bottas had damage from contact at lap 1, so that could have been a reason. In fact, I'll tell you what, actually, I could have a look and see if it's sent me the press release, and then we'll be able to hear it, or not hear it, I'll read it to you, from the drivers' mouths, and they will tell us what the situation was. So Bottas said, we had good race pace, so it's disappointing not to be in the points. In the end, my race was compromised at turn 1 when I was hit from behind and I hit the car ahead. Had damage to the front wing, having lost the end plate, and then the car went into anti-stall before I could get back going again. Didn't know been hit from the back, so I've missed that one. So
yeah, I didn't know that either.
Thanks, Valtteri. The car was clearly good, was able to make decent recovery, but the damage still made it quite tricky. The team got a point with Zhou, so we have something to show for today. And Zhou says, I am really happy with today's result, with the work that has been done in the past few weeks. It's been a tough journey since Montreal because we were very strong at the beginning of the season, and then our performance had a dip. But being back in the points today is an amazing feeling, a great result both for the team and for Alfa Romeo. For the team and Alfa Romeo. You're at Alfa Romeo. Unless it means Sauber and then the sponsor Alfa Romeo. Okay. Who was he driving for? We knew we had a chance today. Our pace was good and it allowed us to fight with the other teams. Nothing in there about any erratic driving or anything from De Vries. And actually, I've not had the Williams one through yet, which is very unusual. They're usually the first, to be fair. Just on AlphaTauri as well. Just have a quick scroll through this. Finishing behind the top 3 teams, the best we could have done, says Gasly. Very happy to be collecting points again. It was a slightly frustrating race. I think I'll have nightmares about Ricciardo's rear wing for the next few nights. We need a few different things to try and pass him, and our overall performance was competitive. Yuki, starting last on the grid was always going to be difficult today, but I think the start of the race was good for me and was able to make some overtakes. I struggled with the pace on the hards, so we need to go away and look at our long run pace and try and improve this for upcoming races. So, yeah, that's just what the teams have had to say. Where are we up to, Stuart? What are we doing? Who am I? What year is this?
You did Alfa Romeo, you did AlphaTauri, so it's got to be Haas, right?
Alpine.
Oh, you're not done Alpine. Well, there you go.
I'll tell you what, there you go. How was Alpine's race today? Stuart forgot about him. Esteban Ocon P11, DNF for Fernando Alonso. In fairness, actually, Alonso was involved in that race quite a bit early on. So he was up to P6 through the pit stops. Questioning an issue with deployment. Team said it was fine. He then said over the team radio, wow. Expect to hear a lot of that over the course of this season, because the rest of this season, because he's now leaving, so he doesn't have to be nice anymore. So you might get a few more GP2 engine style comments if he's struggling for pace. I'm not saying I'll say that at all. But then pitted, was running really long. Pitted end of lap 31. I assume that was for his pit stop, but it wasn't. He pulled over and retired the car, according to Ted on Sky, dropping water pressure, which resulted in overheating, and that was game over for him. They didn't want the engine to go pop, so pretty disappointing in the end for Alonso. But he was in that fight, which was it's what's the word? It's always. There's always anticipation, I feel, when Alonso's in a group like that. You're waiting for him to do something special or blow your mind. But unfortunately, with his reliability problem, didn't work out. And Ocon's another one I've got very little for. Pitted end of lap 19 for the hards. I mean, very quiet race for Ocon. But on the fringes of the points in the end, so not a terrible race.
But no points.
But not what we expect from them in recent races. When you think of, in fact, actually, sorry, Stuart, I've got to make the point. I've said this for the last 2 weeks. That is the first non-points finish for any Alpine car. So the first double retirement or the first double non-points finish since Imola.
With 14th for Ocon and retirement from Alonso. Very similar result, really. Yeah. And that's Italy again. The curse of Italy.
So yeah, it's I thought Alpine were going to come into this weekend as the team to beat in that midfield, especially when you consider their pace in Spa.
They're not a sort of McLaren levels, but there is a sort of an ebb and flow with Alpine, and sometimes they're just not as present. Although like you say, Alonso was doing pretty well, to be fair. Before his retirement, he was sort of involved in a couple of the trains along the way, but very much making himself present. Got in a scrap with Hamilton at one point, but luckily this time they stayed friends. And to be honest, I think this is as you say, a one-off race for them, and we're going to start seeing more regular points till the end of the season. That's what I expect from them.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. I just have a look at what chat are saying. Pretty solid from Alpine, says Sighted Canvas. Alonso was involved until he wasn't anymore. It's kind of very true, yeah. Tho22 just saying, kind of question marking Alpine's reliability. Warren M says, I'll disagree, Sean. Ocon's race was pretty meh. And I think we'll leave it there on Alpine. I've been bigging them up the last few weeks, and it just didn't. I think I predicted Alonso for a top 4 finish, so I was close. I mean, it was bottom 4, so that's something in terms of DNFs. But yes, I will do super chats in a second. I shall do them now. Just it's only fair, isn't it? So super quickly, what we got? Stefan, thank you so much for your super chat. Says the goated duo. How much of a consideration do you think Sargent is worth keeping Latifi in order to get Sargent in 24? We've sort of already answered that, Stefan. You probably were here for that, but I would just say I think if you're not sure about Sargent, you give De Vries or somebody else a chance. I think Latifi is gone. I feel like he was going to need to do something pretty remarkable anyway to keep that seat, but I think that's just possibly the final nail, as they say, for Latifi's F1 career, unless he can stump up an absolute fortune, which I mean he's doing anyway, but I don't think so. AC, thank you very much, mate. It says, do we still need Latifi in F1? We've been through that one. Also says, prepare for a Max Verstappen domination era, something like Michael Schumacher at Ferrari, Vettel at Red Bull. Thank you so much, mate. Stuart was talking about that earlier, feeling like it's another one of those domination eras. And thank you to Pascal as well. Says, I am happy that Alfa Romeo Sauber are back in the points. Could be important for P6 and his constructors. Great to see Peter Sauber with the team. Was he there this weekend? Oh, that's nice. I can't think of the last time I saw Peter Sauber, actually.
No.
It's been a while, so yeah.
I saw Stallone and I saw Hugh Grant, but I must have missed Peter Sauber.
Saw a lot of Robert Schwartzman as well. He was there.
True.
Remember him? Bless him.
Vaguely.
He was the next big thing, wasn't he, at one point? But just have a look at the P6 in the constructors for Alfa Romeo, actually. 52 points, 34 to Haas. I think they've got that, Stuart. 52 points Alfa, 34 Haas, 33 Alpha Tauri, 25 Aston, 6 Williams. They're not going to catch McLaren, but I think they've got 6, surely. Your team, of course, an F1 manager. You've got to be proud.
I'm very proud. It's changed my entire outlook on watching Alfa Romeo at work. They could be doing a lot better based on my simulations.
They're very OP, aren't they, in that game? But yeah. Haas, I'll go to my notes for Haas. I know there's not a lot in here. Magnussen, that contact with Bottas on turn 1, was head of DRS train 2, which was P15 down. 5-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, and he pit at the end of lap 25 for the hard tyre, and I think it was just the one stop for K-Mag before they came in with the safety car towards the end, I think it was, for his second pit. So I'm saying not a lot. That's actually pretty decent for Haas. Mick Schumacher was actually running in P8 through the stops. Pitted eventually on lap 33. That drops him down to 17th place. Nice move on Latifi, turn 1, lap 42. But Latifi then got back past him at the second chicane, and then Mick Schumacher did him at Lesmo 1. So that was a fun little fight. And actually, I think Mick Schumacher was about the only driver who didn't just move aside for the leaders either, was he? He was, in terms of their pace coming through the field, I mean, not being lapped, but he was quite happy to go late on the brakes when they were coming through the field, wasn't he? At least try and challenge them a little bit. So he's obviously felt quite racy today, Mick Schumacher. But I think he's another one, P12 in the end, beating his teammate. I think he's another one that's Haas might be just considering if they ought to give him another season. He seems to have, he's not scoring consistent points or anything crazy like that, but he feels like he's just sort of doing okay, a bit of consistency starting to come through. But that Haas is another car, as we've talked about with other teams, that's some weekends it's brilliant and other weekends it's nowhere.
Yeah, I think Haas in general are probably going to be disappointed with the way their season has sort of played out. It looked like at the beginning of the season they had something, especially with that 5th place from K-Mag, and it's not really been operating at that level kind of since. K-Mag's been in the points, 5 times, I think, looking at, and Schumacher's been in a couple of times. He definitely seems to have stepped up the last couple of races now that conversation has started about whether he's going to be in that seat, and that Haas are looking around at all their options. And Gunther Steiner have been very open about the fact that, Mick Schumacher is just one of many options. I'm glad he's woken up. I prefer he didn't need that incentive to keep going, but I'd like to see him score a few more points. And I think he does have pace there, but I'm probably expecting more of him at this stage, it must be said. I don't know if you're muted.
I was muted. I'm just sat here waffling away to myself. That's the second time I've done that today. I'm pausing. I'm like muting one thing and then muting the other thing and forgetting to unmute. Yeah. Anyway, I was just saying. I'm just looking at his results on the old Wikipedia. So he's 12th today versus 16th, 13th versus 15th on K-Mag. Did lose out to K-Mag in Belgium, but then 14th versus 16th in Hungary. 15th versus the DNF, so he's not 6th versus 8th. He's actually, his results are pretty good versus his teammate, and that could be ultimately what saves him, and maybe even very quickly that brings him into the frame at Alpine if they're not going to get Pierre Gasly because AlphaTauri can't get hurt. So maybe they will think maybe we'll give Mick a go. That's what Ocon wants, although apparently he's not in the popular books, if you like, or the good books of the team after that comment. But yeah, he's actually doing all right. But it is his second season now. Maybe you would expect more, but I think he might be trying to stake a claim for that seat, and I think he's doing okay. But I tend to agree. I thought this was going to be a breakthrough season for him. But then Magnussen has been pretty damn good, hasn't he, this year, given that he had a year out? Mostly.
Yeah, he really has. Magnussen has definitely cast a bit of a shadow over him in the way that maybe Nikita Mazepin didn't. And last year we had no idea really what that car was capable of, because it had 2 rookies and it was terrible and had absolutely no competition. So yeah, I think I'd like to see Mick Schumacher in next year in some way or another. I think partly for the poetry of the name and stuff. And if he goes to Alpine, that's of course the team that made his father famous. It's gone through a few name changes since then, but that's the same team as far as I'm.
Yeah. Was Benetton, wasn't it? Yeah, Tolman.
Yeah,
before that.
So, yeah, I think that'd be a fun little thing. And then if he still can't prove himself, then maybe we look to the many Formula 2 champions who have never seen a Formula 1 opportunity.
Actually, I will say just quickly. Actually, I say that he's Magnus has been fantastic this season, but actually, when you look at the early season, K-Mag was very strong with that 5th place in the opening versus Schumacher's 11th, then obviously withdrew from Jeddah. But Mick Schumacher beat him in Australia. Beat him in... I'm going to count these up very, very quickly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 races this season. That's very... If I've missed any, it could be 11, it could be 9, but about 10 races this season. So actually he's doing better than I think people realise with Mick. I think it feels that K-Mag has been so much better because he's got 22 points versus Mick's 12, but a lot of that did come in those first couple of races for him. Yeah, I might have a proper look at that after the stream, actually. That's interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your point or step on my own point there, but yeah.
No, that's a good observation. That's an interesting thing to bring into the evaluation of like where Schumacher is and whether he should stay and stuff. So yeah, that's interesting. It's harder to judge, isn't it, when both cars aren't scoring regular points?
Yeah, chat just saying, Alex saying K-Mag threw away a lot of points. I don't know if though 22, if you're referring to what we're talking about, says it's because the car has gotten worse. The car has gotten worse, but even if the car's 16 seconds off the pace, then all he can beat is his teammate. So he still deserves a credit for that. But yeah, that's just looking at the results. It doesn't go into the ins and outs of the... I'll have a look at that afterwards because there might be reasons behind some of those. But just an interesting one. Super quickly, for what it's worth. Aston Martin, Sebastian Vettel, car smoking from the rear, losing power. Lap 11 stopped on the track. That was a DNF caused a virtual safety car. Lance Stroll pitted on lap 18, end of lap 18. Hard tyres, and then was told to cool the brakes and pit, but that wasn't a brake issue. He DNF'd as well. Double DNF for Aston Martin. Pretty disappointing season. Pretty disappointing weekend. Anything to add, Stuart, on Aston? Sorry, Aston fans, there's just not much to say.
No, there really isn't, apart from just the endless pain for particularly Sebastian Vettel, I must say. It's a real shame he has to end his career in this fashion, and it's become a bit of a tradition to hear him wail and swear in agony every time he's knocked out in Q1, which I think is 5 times in the last 6 race weekends. It's just not fun to watch, is it? It's not sort of enjoyable. I don't think people have any particularly bad feelings about Aston Martin enough for it to be sort of, I don't know, hubristic or whatever. No one's sort of dancing with joy at how much they're sort of floundering around, and hopefully they'll be back in the solid midfield next year, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd like to think they can, because I keep saying it. He's very ambitious, is Lawrence Stroll, isn't he? He really wants to take that team to winning races and titles, which feels like a long way off. But you put everything in the right place, it's absolutely possible. But they're a long way off at the moment, and I feel like it's just really disappointing because they seem to be sort of turning things around a little bit, and then it's just sort of fallen away again. And today was just... I can't even think of an interesting thing that happened. I think Lance Stroll had a pretty big lockup at one point, but I can't think of anything apart from the power unit issue for Vettel that really happened. So, yeah, Sam saying in chat, Aston Martin focusing on the future now. They've got to do, really, haven't they? There's no point focusing on this season. It's done for them. Zach actually says Aston Martin is proof money isn't everything. It's a very good, like I say, you've got to get everything in the right place. And 3 Merc engines out again today, says Warren M.
That's a good point. Which is interesting, actually, because we spent Mercedes, particularly the team, have been taking the least sort of reliability issues over the course of the season. But I guess it comes for everyone eventually. I think these maybe this something to discuss. Well, we're sort of getting to the end of the teams now, but these limited power unit components are really being stretched this year, aren't they? They're as they tend to every year, but it feels like we're now in that phase now when it's just every race is going to feature some penalties, every race is going to feature some new components, and I think once again every single team and every single car will blow past at least one of their allowed limits, which puts a lot of things into question. I'm
pretty sure we'll talk about engines shortly. Almost a guarantee. please do drop a like on the stream. We're on 349. We need to get to, we don't need to, we'd like to get to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. Charles would like to get to 500. So please do drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe as well. It is going to go very quiet in the world of F1 now for a few weeks, but back for Singapore before you know it. The way this bloody year's going, it'll soon be here. I shouldn't worry about that. But
just 6 to go.
I know, it doesn't feel real. What a weird year it's been. Driver of the day, then, I guess, is where we're going now. Officially, Nick de Vries. I think I know where this is going. Nick de Vries won the official driver of the day. 20-something%, I think it was in the end. So I haven't seen the full result. Might have a look in a bit. Let me know in chat who your driver of the day is. Stuart, who are you going with today?
I was trying to think. Is there anyone except Nick de Vries you can? So the two, like, I guess, boring or obvious answers are either Nick de Vries, incredible debut, got stuck in, defended, great qualifying, made it work, etc. And Max Verstappen, of course, who had like incredible pace and just seemed untouchable once again. I guess I will throw into the ring Carlos Sainz, maybe, for a great run from the back of the grid up to fourth place. I mean, officially, I'm saying Nick de Vries, but I thought I'd add a little bit of flavour in there.
Nothing wrong with a bit of flavour. I mean, I've got 4 nominees. I've just seen in chat somebody say Norris deserves a shout, so maybe 5 nominees, but Verstappen, Sainz, de Vries and Hamilton in no particular order. Hamilton from 19th on the grid, Carlos Sainz through the field as well to P4, Verstappen absolute domination, and de Vries for doing that in a car he doesn't really know. It's a tough pick. I mean, you've gone with de Vries. The story, sentimental side of Sean would probably say de Vries as well, but I think... even though Verstappen was faultless, I feel like going with Carlos Sainz because he came through the field, probably would have had a shot at P3 as well without the safety car late on. So, like I say, sentimental side says de Vries, brain says Verstappen, but I think I'm going to go Sainz because I think I've picked Verstappen the last couple of weeks just because he's been dominant, and that doesn't mean that I shouldn't pick him again. But got to mix it up every now and again. As I said in my preview, it's good to. What did you say? Add a bit of flavour. It's nice to do that from time to time. Let's see what you say in chat then for your driver of the day. Professional Moron looks like he got the first one in. Says de Vries. Brad says de Vries as well. Vries says if not de Vries. Vries says if not de Vries, Sainz or Hamilton. Undefined username says de Vries, of course. Warren M says Sainz. Michael says Nick de Vries too. Sainz had a great race, says James. He did indeed. Leah says Hamilton. Raoul says Max. Nick de Vries for, is it Forge99? Sam's gone with Max. X36 says Hamilton Verstappen. Wakasan says Norris. Grand Master Yoda says Max was flawless. Fantaboy 15 says the Flying Dutchman, who is obviously de Vries. Brad says Nick de Vries. Zed Mackey says Nick was the most exceeding of expectations for sure. Free says Norris deserves a shout too. I've read that one. Del says Sainz. Adonis says Lewis. Richard says Nick de Vries. Sainz would also be fair. It's actually thinking about it and looking at chat, I think it's a tougher pick than people think, or it feels like it, because actually, Verstappen, yeah. Sainz, yeah. Hamilton, yeah. De Vries, yeah. There's no reason not to pick any of them, really. So, Norris is thrown in there as well, as I say. Del says Sainz. I think I've read that one, but I'll read it again for you. Pascal says Zhou and De Vries. Zhou had a very good race. Zach says De Vries. He's practically geriatric for a rookie, but he earned it. Actually, I'm going to say that now, actually, just while you remind me, Zach. In reality, Nick de Vries is 27. In my head, he's about 19. I don't know why.
He does look very young. And he's a very small man. He has a very youthful appearance to him.
He does.
He looks like he's just reaching his 20s.
I'll read a few more out super quickly then. Thank you, Zach, just for putting that back in my mind. Sainz actually had third when Russell pitted, says C. Guy Franklin says Verstappen. Richie says Sainz. Mirko says Nick de Vries. Brendan says Lewis. Everett says de Vries. And Purple Zebra says he's how old? I know. I'm sure it's 27. It's something like that. But yeah, and I should mention as well, because Alex has pointed out, did you see de Vries struggle to get out of the car? He was saying that he quite a lot of pain in his shoulder, didn't he? And his arms was spasming. And you think, well, kind of expected. He's not done that in a Formula One car ever, and he's had very little preparation for it. Yes, he's had simulator work and he's done FP1, but the odd FP1 isn't the same as 50 odd laps flat out around Monza, is it? So I think big shout out there from him as well. So yeah, it's his age always surprises me, but yeah, if you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat. We will answer a few as always. I have a feeling we might have some silly season stuff in here, and all of that business. I've got a little issue, Stuart. Am I right to throw something at you from chat and then just nip off for literally about 2 minutes and just leave you answering that for a sec? You could say no, it's fine.
Go on then. Leave me with this chat, which I'm sure won't turn feral.
The question is, Russell. No, I'm joking. You have 2 minutes to talk about George Russell. No. I'm trying to look at an example of something that you might want to... I'm waiting for chat to basically come in and say something. Is there anything you want to talk about, Stuart, quickly, and I'll disappear?
I'll just keep chat busy. Chat, give me a prompt. Let's go.
I'll be 2 minutes, I promise.
Sure. So what do you guys really think of Sean? All right, here we go. Ugh. What was Norris's start? I mean, that's a couple of people said Norris for drive of the day, but I think having that terrible start kind of put a little bit paid to that, didn't they? When so many other people had great starts. Well, I'm not going to go on safety car procedure yet because I feel like Sean and I will fully tackle that as a topic. I'm assuming you will. Maybe Sean just is sick of the whole thing already. When I microwave a burrito, do I type 130 or 90? Well, I'll tell you, nice person, I have a microwave with a dial, like a sort of a circle that you turn. It's analog, which I hate because it's really imprecise. Should Andretti be allowed to join the grid? I'll give him either. I think. So the question about Andretti joining the grid is about this whole 11th team thing. And the problem with the 11th team is the FIA and Formula One put a sort of $2 million bond on joining. So teams have to pay $2 million up front just for the pleasure of forming a new team, which adds a massive amount of expense onto the already massive expense of starting a team, building everything that's necessary to do that. So it's basically to put off people making an 11th team. Now, I think that's incredibly restrictive and slightly problematic. But I always think about 2010 when we had almost four new teams come in, kind of forced through by the FIA after the financial crisis. And those teams were not at all ready to be in Formula One. And every single one of them dissolved within, I think, 5 years. It was a real mess. So I don't want that to happen. Now, I think Andretti would be more prepared for that. And I think if they hoover up Porsche, who have clearly left the Red Bull thing, and as I think Will Buxton suggested, say, we're Andretti, we've got Porsche, we want to join Formula One. I think that's an incredibly solid package that would be quite convincing to the FIA, whether or not they waiver that $200 million bond. I did say 200 million. Did I say 2 million? I meant 200 million. In my brain, I was saying 200 million. Yeah, 2 million is nothing for an F1 team. $200 million is what I meant to say. So yeah, but anyway, what do I think about it? I'm fully in favor of it as long as they are a solid team that are able to stick around and be at least vaguely competitive and not run around 3 seconds off the pace like the teams in 2010 were. And again, the 2010 teams were forced to go onto Cosworth engines, which were rubbish compared to everyone else. There was no cost cap, which was agreed, which meant the teams were too small. We're living in a different kind of world now. So I think it would be very possible for Andretti to put together a package and come race with Formula One. So if they can make it work, I'd like to see it. I'd still like to see Porsche, as well, or Porsche. I don't know which you guys prefer, but Porsche is the thing I've always said, and it's probably incorrect because it's not German. Join in some regard, but I think for me, what I definitely need to see is the existing 10 teams being stable financially and competitive. That's what I want more than I want any other team joining. We definitely need these teams to feel like they are on steady ground and able to get themselves into a competitive position.
You don't want mobile chicanes again, do you? That's the thing.
Exactly. It wasn't fun. So I definitely want, I think I haven't heard much from Williams lately either, that they are, struggling and about to fall off a cliff and leave. So I don't want teams to be disappearing again like we did in 2008, 2009 and 2012 to 15.
I agree. And hopefully if we ever do get some more teams like what was it? They were Virgin to start with, weren't they? Virgin, HRT, and Lotus as they were when they started. If we do get those teams, hopefully they won't be sold a dream by FOM that fails to materialise. That didn't help them at all, if I remember my history correctly. But yeah, the thing with Bernie was always very, well, if you can't afford to spend the money, if you don't have the money and can't afford it, then don't spend it. It's like, well, that's all well and good, Bernie. But you are taking them all over the world, mate. They've got to be able to afford to do it. Bernie. Yeah. I was going to have a quick chat, see if there's anything specific, but I feel like there are a couple of things we do need to kind of touch on a little bit more. I think the penalty situation seems to have caused a bit of, not controversy, but conversation this weekend. And obviously the late safety car, we've kind of already done that one. I think we're both kind of on the page that, follow the rules if you're unsure, and they did that. But I think the engine penalties, I've seen a lot of people get quite angry about, or frustrated, maybe not angry, but frustrated about how long it took for us to get a grid, how long it took for people to work out where everyone was going to be because of these penalties. But I'm sort of going to sort of rein it in a little bit and just say that, yes, okay, we did have this in Belgium. Yes, it does kind of, yesterday's qualifying was rendered not pointless, but you knew that unless he stuck it in the wall, Leclerc was going to be on pole. Well, I don't tune into qualifying. If that's the case, just give me the result. There's no... That takes the fun out of it for me. But it's not like this is happening every weekend. It's happened twice in 3 weekends because Spa and Monza are two of the best tracks to take those penalties at. We're usually getting 1 or 2 a weekend maximum. So I wonder if this is one of those things that feels worse than it is because we've had 2 in quick succession, bearing in mind that we did also have a very similar situation in Monza in 2017, I think it was, when so many people took penalties, it resulted in Lance Stroll on the front row, if you remember. I think Lewis Hamilton was the only driver that started where he qualified in that race. So this isn't a new thing. But I guess the point I'm looking at, Stuart, is what are the alternatives? Because I've seen Sky, Martin Brundle suggesting, percentage of Constructors' Championship points, but then my argument to that is, do Ferrari get the points back that Leclerc lost when he stuck it in the wall in France? No. It does feel harsh that the drivers get penalised quite so heavily, but the team also get penalised when the driver makes a mistake. And it's a team sport at the end of the day, so I don't think that's something I'd be comfortable with. I've seen a lot of suggestions, and it's something I could get on board with, that maybe we just make sure engine penalties or engines are completely part of the cost cap. You're given a cap for the season. If you exceed that because you're taking too many engines, then you can't bring that nice new front wing because you would have exceeded the cap. And then you watch people suddenly build engines that can survive. There's that, but also, can we just increase it to 5? Because I feel like it's usually around 5 or 6 that people use for a season anyway. Can we just take it to 5 and then not do this? I think... Do you see what I'm saying? I feel like the explosion is a little bit of a storm in a teacup because we've had 2 so close to each other.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that, and I think Spa and Monza are traditionally places where you'll stick new engines in, if you're calculating that you will need to take them before the end of the season. I think that's a decent place to take them because they're power tracks, and you need some nice fresh engines to be performative. And Spa in particular, it's much easier to overtake, so having the penalty isn't as much of a penalty. Perhaps I am on the side. I like bringing them into the cost cap so that there is sort of a automatic, I guess, if you will, limit built into taking new engines. That's useful. I don't particularly like points-based penalties. I think that's something that's can get a little bit confusing. I mean, I think how confusing a grid penalty was maybe a little bit overblown by Sky, by people who I think should be a little bit better at working out grid penalties. But I do think once you start taking points away, and again, you can sort of. So we're going to Singapore, and Max Verstappen could potentially win the world championship there. And if he does pull out enough points, he will celebrate it, and it'll be front page news and stuff. If we had points being taken off for taking new engines, that couldn't happen because, for example, there's the possibility that Max Verstappen will take another engine in the next race, lose a certain percentage of his points, and then Leclerc be back in the hunt again. That puts us in a weird situation and a complicated kind of set of scenarios, which I don't really like. And I think another little problem with grid penalties for engine stuff is when you have situations like Monza and like Spa, is often you don't get the whole penalty. Like Max was meant to start from the back of the grid in Spa, and he started, I think, in 14th, which you could argue is not the full penalty for all the things that he took. And I'm in favor of like harshly discouraging going over your engine allowance, and I thinking of perhaps things like drive-throughs kicking in once you've taken over a certain amount of things, so that you have to take a drive-through during the race, which is quite hard. A drive-through, or maybe a fixed penalty that hovers over your head, from a fixed time penalty that will
like
be added
2 seconds or 3 seconds in your pit stop sort of thing.
That sort of adds up. So then, and it needs to be like significantly detrimental, that it's not just a thing you can sort of wave off by sticking in an entire new power unit. And if you have time penalties or drive-throughs, then that's not something that gets like meted out by other people taking a penalty the way grid penalties can. It's like a fixed penalty that gets applied during the race. Maybe something like that. I don't know. There's no perfect solution, and there's no solution that doesn't get slightly complicated, because you then have to like work out how that penalty affects their race. But I would like people to start the race pretty much where they qualified, and I would like the penalties to be substantial and equal, and just working out a way to do that in a way that's not too complicated for the audience and doesn't take away too much from the show, I think is the tricky thing.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, we're having a conversation now, and we're not going about it too much, because if you've got Sky coverage, we're very sick of hearing about it. But it's something that, we might not see this again this season, and it'll go quiet until maybe Canada next year or something like that, when they all start to Baku, when people start taking penalties. It's not every weekend that we see this. It's just because I think from the calendar I've seen next year, Belgium is a lot further apart from Monza next year. I think Belgium's going to be just after the British Grand Prix in July. So that's the rumoured provisional calendar. So actually, it may not hit quite so hard next year. But I think because the race was so close together, that's maybe kicked things off a bit more. And I think I've seen lots of arguments about it, as you do on social media. It's such a balanced place to be, such a fun place to be. But I just don't think it's the issue that some are making it out to be. To be honest, and people getting frustrated that, well, it's been 3 hours and we've not got a grid. Well, actually, by the regulations, the FIA don't have to publish a grid until Sunday morning or Sunday just before the race. So actually, they don't have to do it at all. And if you want to know what the grid is, then unless you're a journalist who absolutely needs it, at which point you, in my opinion, should be sitting down working it out, just wait for the race. Just wait till that pre-race, or wait till somebody shows. It's not something to stress about if you don't know what the grid is. But at the same time, I understand why people might think, well, I want to know. I want to know what the grid is for tomorrow. And I agree with you, Stuart. Having qualifying, coming away with an order and then going, but they're not starting anywhere near that order is annoying. And like I say, we knew Leclerc would be on pole regardless of what had happened. Fortunately, he set the fastest time, so he got, that was something from that. But we knew he was going to be on pole, and that does take away from it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just being Shawnee moany Shawnee today about it. I don't think it's that big of a deal, and it's kind of been blown up a little bit again because for the third time those races were so close together. We shall see. We're not going to see many, if any, in Singapore or in Japan, so it'll all calm down. I can't think of another solution. I did think maybe if, say, Verstappen took an engine penalty, maybe, or a driver takes an engine penalty, maybe that driver can score points, but they don't contribute to the constructors. But then again, back to my other point, the team don't get the points when the driver makes a mistake. So it's a team sport at the end of the day. And the other thing I did want to talk about, I'll take some comments in chat as well, but the other thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to mention this now because I did write some stuff down. I prepared myself with a little cheat sheet, but a lot of people complaining big time again on coverage and on social media that this whole thing with the safety car at the end, it's not what racing's about. We shouldn't have races finished on the safety car. Something needs to be done. Do we need a rule where I think I've seen examples of when there's under 5 laps or whatever left, should we have a red flag and all of this? Races to finish under the safety car in Formula One history, safety car introduced full-time in 1993, is now 10. Canada 99, Australia 2009, Italy 2009, Monaco 2010, Brazil 2012, Canada 2014, China 2015, Bahrain 2019 and 2020, and Italy 2022. They're not happening every weekend. They're not happening multiple times a season for the most part. Do we need a rule change for something that happens so infrequently? Really? I mean, what's that? So once in 99, then nothing until 2009, and then one a year. 2009 had 2, Monaco had 1, 2010, Brazil 2012, Canada 2014. Do you know what I mean? I'm totally up for debate in Formula One and totally up for conversation of things that need to change, but I don't think it happens frequently enough for us to be getting in a flap like some have. You know what I mean when I say some have, over something like the race finishing under a safety car, which is just something that from time to time is going to happen because I don't think everything warrants a red flag. If Ricciardo had lost it at the Lesmos, smashed his car up and destroyed the barrier, then get that red flag out. But it stopped on track. I don't think it needs a red flag. Just my take.
I do mostly agree with you. I don't think it's like an overwhelming problem that we need to fix. And I was a little surprised, to be honest, at how animated some people, and particularly I think Sky presenters and Sky were about how big a problem it really was. Because let's be honest, Max was 10 at least seconds ahead of Leclerc when the safety car was called, or when the yellow flag was called. He had a lot of pace over him. I don't know what they thought we were missing out on from a safety car period, where I think almost everybody stopped for tyres. Positions didn't change particularly. Yes, he bunched the field up and stuff. I don't think we're, based on the 53 laps or 50 whatever laps 49 laps that come before, we weren't expecting a massive dramatic change in positions. So the ways that people were talking, and again, I do blame Sky for some of this, for egging it up. It seemed like we'd had a barnstorming finale stolen from us, when actually the race was suspended at a point when things had kind of settled out, and actually the closest battle on track was, I think, Zhou versus De Vries versus Gasly. To sort of hit the other side slightly, if we do want to aim at trying to make sure races do finish under green flag conditions and we do manage to get a few laps, maybe we could instigate a procedure. I think it needs to be formalized. As we've seen from Abu Dhabi last year, I don't think we could just leave things at the whim of race directors to make calls on behalf of the show, even though they do have the power to call a red flag if they want. But if you want to formalize something, let's say if the race is safety car with 5 laps to go or something, you call a red flag and then you do a rolling start afterwards without changing the tires, then that's basically identical to restarting the race under the safety car. It just means you don't lose all those laps, so you can still have a bit of a finish. That I'd be fine with. But like you say, I don't really think it's such a big problem that we need to fix it. And I'm glad that they followed standard procedure in finishing this race, despite maybe being a little bit underwhelming looking to some people.
I think it's interesting you mentioned. I don't want to go on about it because I know Hamilton fans, Mercedes fans are still really fuming about it, but I think a lot of people just sort of like, we can't keep bringing it up and we can't keep banging on about it when, as an example. But again, if this happens in Italy last year, pre-Abu Dhabi, I don't think anybody says a word, really. A few people go, oh, what a shame we didn't get to see a final lap shootout, but most people probably just sort of go, oh, well, that's racing. Sometimes it happens. Oh, never mind. On to the next one. I'm not going to keep saying that, other than I just don't think it's this big issue. I'm not going to get wound up like I did last week. I upset a few people with the way I got wound up last week. But I think actually just on that, I think last week's rant, maybe me just at 36 years old being a little bit naive and falling for the nonsense on social media and the nonsense on Sky post race in particular, and or certainly in commentary anyway, and a couple of idiots in the chat. I let it bother me and I shouldn't have lost my rag like I did. I don't think for a second that the overwhelming majority, probably almost all of you, I don't think for a second any of you are morons really, but that there are one or two people, understatement on Twitter, who are just so dramatic, Stuart, sometimes over everything. I have to just sort of, right, I'm logging off. I've started doing that now. I see something overly dramatic. I log off. I walk away. That's it. I'll come back later when the memes start again, because that's why we're on there, really, isn't it? Let's come to your guys' questions and comments then. Regarding, I saw Zach make a good point actually. It says Spa 2021 inspired a rule change, and that only happened once, which is fair enough. But I take your point. I'm sure you take mine as well. And actually, Zach did say earlier, not that dramatic, but it does feel a little bit wonky and confusing. Maybe they just do bring in a rule, 5 laps to go or under 10 laps to go. Red flag. There is precedent for it, isn't there? Baku last year, Max's tyre blew out quite late. We had the red flag, didn't we? So there is precedent for it.
Yeah, I think there needs to be good reason. And actually, just to add, I think I know people's opinion differ on this. I don't like cars going around with a blooming great tractor on track, swinging a car around from a thing. I'm not a big fan of that. So if there was any reason to red flag it, I'd say that was it. But they did manage to make it work. It's just not something I like to see. I know it was kind of a safe part of the track, but still, it's always a bit grit your teeth when that happens. But yeah, I mean, there is precedent, but I guess they need to find a reason for it. And as the FIA said in their statement, they saw no reason to call a red flag.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume this was the point you were making, Stuart. Nick says that Baku 2021 was for safety reasons, debris on the track. I suppose that's what you mean by there needs to be a good reason for it. You can't just be that car's pulled over, let's red flag it. It needs to be that barrier needs repairing, or we've got debris everywhere, or there's concern over safety. Really, you can't just be throwing red flags because somebody's pulled over all the time.
Yeah, basically, and FIA and the stewards clearly felt they could move that car without it being interrupting running. There wasn't stuff all over the track. Marshals didn't need to be walking across the whole length of the track, and so they managed it as they felt was safe, despite me being a little bit cringe about having that car on a tractor.
Yeah. Is F1 TV available? No, we haven't got F1 TV, Alex, unless you get a VPN. I think that's an option, but I don't think that works all the time. I would like F1 TV over here. Not that anyone from F1's listening, but if they are, when that deals up with Sky, if you want to give us F1 TV as an option, that would be lovely. I've got the what's the other package called? The one where you've got the archive and things like that. I've got that because I love going back and watching classic races. So yeah, not proper
something
stuff.
F1 TV related. It's yeah. The only thing we're allowed.
Do you think? I know we're really, really speculating this, but do you think maybe FOM will push Sky a little bit on their deal and say, right, that's up next year or whenever it's up. We're going to bring F1 TV in, whether you like it or not, or do you think they'll take the money at the end of the day? This is a business, isn't it? Really?
Honestly, I'm not really sure. And I know that F1 TV now have their own in-house commentary team. They nicked what's his name, Jolyon Palmer, to be the pundit on that, and I'm not sure who the main commentator is. I did know, I've forgotten. And I kind of expected that commentary to be the thing that's on all the little YouTube clips and all the things they put out there, but they're still using Sky as their kind of main commentary for all their clips and stuff. So maybe they're not quite ready yet to be in that position, or maybe it's hard to say. I kind of expected them to sort of be moving in that direction to making F1 TV the place to see Formula One, but perhaps not yet.
Anyone that's got F1 TV, do they still have their problems? I know certainly a couple of years ago they really struggled. There were lots of issues, weren't there, with races not showing and technical problems. I don't know if that's still an issue. I'm sure they're working on it. Yeah, 2024. Thank you, Pascal. End of 2024 for the Sky deal. So that's come around quite quick, hasn't it? It's quite scary. Free says 96 likes to go. Scared the life out of me. Says 8,876 people watching. It's 876 it was at the time. Thanks for that, Freeze. You made me poo my pants. Yeah, please do drop a like. Always appreciated. We're only 90 away now from Charles Edward Cheese's 500. Sky wants that Netflix drama cash, says Valentine. Or Valentine. I'm so bad pronunciation, I apologise. Cited Canvas says safety car plus 1 lap. So whatever happens, you got fuel then, haven't you? That's the only issue there. The fuel. I see what you're going with there. Whatever happens, safety car finish. You have 1 more lap, but there's the fuel to worry about there. That's a good point. Yeah. Interesting thought, though. Maybe extra time like Formula E does. I know it's the same fuel problem, but that always makes me laugh when you get the added time at the end. Just waiting for the announcer, like in football, to be sort of like, there will be a minimum of 4 minutes of added time. They do save it under the safety car, yeah, but is there going to be enough to... Are they going to be able to save it enough? Purple Zebra says, I'm sick of £35 a month for 720p on Now TV. That seems a lot, £35 a month. My Sky bill's insane. Yeah. And
you get adverts as well, so it's sort of taking the P a little bit. The Sky / Now TV package.
I'm just looking for questions. I've got everyone. I'm asking people questions, and then I'm running out of things to talk about because they're not. I'm not critical. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll end that poll quickly, actually. So we did do a poll a little bit earlier. It's again pretty one-sided. Will McLaren pass Alpine for P4 in the championship? 29% say yes, 70% say no, 1% I don't know. I don't know where that's gone. They were the two options, and we had 99%. So there you go. Thanks, YouTube. I'm sure it's all down to decimal points, like nonsense. Connor Filippo says, opinion on the F3 drama. I'm going to have to be... I didn't watch it, and I've not read up on it, Stuart, so I didn't know there was drama. I just knew that Victor Martins had won the title. I didn't... Was the drama?
Yeah, I watched the highlights reel. So there was a red flag late in the race, and I can't remember how many laps were left, maybe 8 laps or something. And so they stopped the race, and then they didn't restart the race because they sort of ran out of time in their slot in the schedule, apparently. So he sort of won the championship without the race being finished. There were sort of 8 laps left to go, and they decided just not to run those laps. Which is a sort of weird and frustrating way to end a season. And some people are unhappy with that.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I missed the start of the F2 race as well. I had to go back and find a clip of that. But that sounds like it was a bit frustrating. See, that's something... You don't want a championship to end under a red flag and not restart, do you, in that situation? So that's not... But I mean, from what I've not seen a huge amount of F3 this season. But from what I have, Victor Martins is very much a worthy champion. So maybe it worked.
Yeah, but that bear man, I think, had a good chance, and I think some people are annoyed he didn't get the opportunity to use those 8 laps to try and get it. But that's the problem with Junior Series on it within the F1 weekend, is that they do have a limited time to fill their slot, and we see sometimes actually with W Series a lot, like you get safety cars. And they're time limited. They're a time limited race, and you get a safety car for about a third of the entire race, and you wonder how are these junior drivers getting the laps they need if you are squeezing them into a tight slot like that.
So you're Chamber, and then there's Ollie Bearman or Ollie Bearman. Are you two related? Is he like your cousin or your sidekick or something?
Have you ever seen us in the same place at the same time,
This
Sean?
is true. This is very true.
Why am I so upset about this red flag?
Why did the safety car take multiple laps to exit the pits after it was called, and why did it pick up Russell instead of the race leader? Again, not really looked into it too much because I was getting the stream ready. My thought on that would be it's picked Russell up and not let him go immediately because he's got to take the safety car's got to take them past the incident, and there's a tractor or whatever it was out there, a vehicle on track. So instead of letting Russell go to sort of, I know he's got to stick to a delta time, but to go around a bit quicker than he would do under the safety car when you've got marshals on track and a vehicle as well, maybe they just thought keep them behind the safety car, then release him after the Lesmos, possibly. But then he's still got to come round, hasn't he? But then the safety car would have waited anyway, so it was odd.
I was watching it on the driver tracker on the map, and I think this was an error from the safety car. The safety car came out at the wrong time and picked up Russell by mistake, whereas they should have waited for Verstappen to come round. So it didn't actually, when the safety car was called, it came out. It didn't wait a few laps. It was actually leading Russell round for 2 or 3 laps before it let him go. And people like Verstappen and Leclerc and stuff were taking all that time because they have a limited pace that they're allowed to go at. Once the safety car's been called, they were taking a long time to actually catch up to the safety car that was holding the wrong car. So it was a big error, and there were about 11 cars behind the safety car erroneously. So that added on to the time in terms of getting rid of the safety car. It should have let Russell and everyone else go straight away. Really, it was really weird. Where there was a lot of people saying in commentary saying, "Where's the safety car? Where's the safety car?" It was on the track, and it was in front of Russell. And for some reason we weren't looking at it, but it was there the whole time, in the wrong place. So yeah, I still don't think we would have got even a lap's worth of running, but it definitely did slow things down.
I'm sure there's a way to get like a driver tracker and a safety car tracker up when I'm watching races, but yeah, it did take forever because I thought Verstappen had missed his chance to pit, and then they're like, well, he's not caught the safety car yet, and I thought, well, where's the bloody safety car? Very weird. I think whatever your opinion is of how that race finished, I think race control needs to be a bit sharper on those things going forward, definitely. Raul, good evening, mate. Says, do you think if Red Bull Racing could bring the new chassis, would they add another level to their domination because they would have found how to cost cap? Some in the paddock feel it's impossible. Well, from what I understand, Raul, from what Christian Horner was saying, they're not bringing a new chassis either now or it was never the plan. He said they've got no plans to bring it between now and the end of the season. So I'm not saying they didn't. They may well have had the plan to do it. But with their domination the way it is, there's no need to, is there? I suppose is the point to that one. But I suppose if we're talking ifs and buts, I suppose it does add another level to their domination, because if they can make their car lighter with a new lightweight chassis and stay within the cost cap, and others are sort of struggling to keep within the cost cap and can't develop quite so much, I mean, that's ultimate domination for Red Bull in this cost cap era, isn't it? So fascinating to think that they could still be even better than they already are, Stuart. So do you think saving that lightweight chassis for next year maybe now? Obviously they couldn't spend the money now, could they? I don't know. It's really weird because you've got the rumours saying that they've got a chassis coming, Stuart, and then you've got Christian Horner saying that's not happening and never was. Where are you getting these stories from? Which is so Christian Horner.
I think you can take what Christian Horner says with a pinch of salt, because he does like
just
sort of
pinch
playing games with the media a bit. So yeah, make of that what you will. The only thing I think I could add to that is because they've got, essentially they're not in the fight for the championship anymore. They've put a big buffer before even, Max and Horner were saying they don't need to win anymore, but they'd like to. If they want to try the new chassis to learn from it to help their 2023 development, then it's a good time to do it, because there's not really a risk in terms of the championship. So maybe they'll be thinking of that, but yeah, perhaps they won't bother doing anything, and they're just going to turn all their attention to 2023 and just use what they've got to finish out the season.
I often look across the chat, and there are a few people in there that have got a real way with words, and they always make me smile. Richard Potts says, if Red Bull Racing haven't already switched to 2023, I'll show my arse in Woolly's window.
Sure.
I don't know where I'd be without you lot. You're brilliant. For First of all, Woolies. Oh, that's a flashback, isn't it? Christmas on the horizon. I miss Woolies. Let's take a moment. Yeah. Okay. You go for it, Richard. I weirdly now really hope they have switched to 2023. Comments on Perez and his brakes being on fire and him still finishing, says David. We did touch on it earlier, David. Briefly, it was quite bizarre. Quite a lot of smoke. I thought that was race over for him, to be honest, Stuart. I thought that's going to be a lot of damage under there. But Monza, pretty quick straights. I think it was it on fire for a good lap, I would have said. But long straights, that fire maybe calming down a little bit. But it is a heavy braking circuit, especially that run to turn one. So maybe not surprised to see it. But actually, I'll tell you what I will say. Actually, as an extension to that. Sorry, Stuart, all over the place. As an extension to that. We saw a lot of drivers, didn't we, coming into the pits today, really slamming those brakes on late and trying to maximise that pit entry with some good locking up.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, and I'm not. Did we have a speeding in the pit lane earlier on this weekend? Maybe I'm thinking of Formula 2. Yeah, not during the race, but I think maybe I'm thinking of Formula 2. But yeah, we did. And actually, I'm gonna maybe counter a point you make. There are heavy braking zones, which are put a lot of load and heat through the brakes. But actually, because there aren't a lot of braking zones and there are a lot of high speed sections, there's a lot of this lap is actually cools the brakes down. Whereas somewhere like Hungary, maybe a less extent Monaco, but somewhere where there's actually just a lot of braking zones and not a lot of getting your foot off the brake is when you also have heating problems. But yeah, he'd flat spotted his tire. He had some problems there and dialed the bias back to the rear tires. So they were doing a bit more of the braking. And I think that seemed to work out for him because he picked up the pace pretty quickly after that lap with the fiery brakes. So I think he just kind of managed it, got away with it.
Yeah. Nothing. I can't see anything in the feed from the FIA about pit lane speeding in F1, so must have been an F2 one. A says, are you talking about Woolworths? Who the hell calls it Woolies? We always called it Woolies where I'm from.
Yeah.
Oh, where are you living, eh? No, we always called it Woolies. It was always Woolly. Woolies. There was there's always a story about a nan in these bloody streams, isn't there? My nan used to call Toys R Us Toys R Us. Bless her. There were yeah. She's called Ferrero Rocher Ferrari Rochets, so she was a character, bless her. Anyway, let's have a look there. Let's see what you're saying in chat. Let's see. No worries, David. I just went over that a little bit there, but yeah, I think. Are you surprised there wasn't more damage, Stuart, to Perez's brakes? I mean, a lap is a long time. It feels like it, but it's quite a short lap time-wise, isn't it, in Monza?
It did seem a little bit alarming when it happened. I was wondering if he'd be able to manage that, but yeah, after a lap or two, it did seem quite clear that he was all right. I was keeping an eye on his sort of lap times, and he didn't seem to be having too much of a problem. So yeah, after we just watching him for a lap or two, he seemed kind of fine. So I wasn't too worried after that, and I think I kind of forgot about it actually until sort of the end of the race.
Marcelo says Sainz overtook the safety car with Max Verstappen behind. And then he came back behind the queue. He did one lap less, so he should be the winner. Even more drivers did that.
Hang on, I'm trying to go through that again. Who said that?
Marcelo. Sainz overtook the safety car with Max Verstappen behind, and then he came back behind the queue. He did one lap less, so he should be the winner. Even more drivers did that. Did we have some shenanigans with unlapping and...
I mean, my instinct is no, because obviously the timers count how many laps are done, which is one of the reasons that you can't just push back markers behind the, behind the front runners after a safety car. You have to make them unlap themselves because it plays havoc on the lap counters. So I don't know about that off the top of my head.
I'll have a look on Twitter and see if there's anything on there. That's the place to be for all the up-to-date news. It's all incredibly reliable. I did just see somebody. It was Nick, I think it was. The brakes were on fire for Perez, by the way, because of vibrations caused by a flat-spotted tyre. Just for a little bit more info there for you. I Considering all Leclerc had to do for pole was beat George, it makes no sense that they prioritise a quali spec and not make the same sacrifice Max did for race pace, says Naughty 88. Nick also says, will Checo get Max's floor for Singapore? They've had a different floor since Spa, surely long enough. I hope so for Checo's sake, because if it's the floor causing him problems, then he's not going to want to be struggling through the pack, is he, in Singapore? So hopefully... let's take a couple more then, and then we will wrap it up. The factory shop is definitely still about. There's one in Mablethorpe. I drove past it the other week to let you know. How are we on this conversation? Woolworths, that's why. Yes. Yes, the factory shop does still exist. If I Red Bull, I'd save it for next year. If you're that far in the lead, you don't want to give a reason for people to snoop around your finances, says Zach. Good point. I mean, let's be honest, Stuart. They don't need to do anything, do they? They could probably revert to a car from earlier in the season and still cruise to this championship now. Unless you think we're going to have the most amazing final 6 races that turn this championship on its head and shock us all and send us into a long winter wondering what the hell just happened. You never know.
I mean, they could not turn up to the next 6 races and still potentially win.
Yeah. Christ.
I mean, unlikely, but, Ferrari aren't guaranteed to win all the remaining races. So, yeah, I think they can do whatever they want, to be honest. I agree with you.
I'll just try. What's the official gap then? I'll have to get my calculator out. I'm not good with maths.
Constructors or drivers?
Drivers. So it's 335 minus 219. So that's 100. It's 109. So it'd be 116. Cool.
Yeah.
It was 109 last week, wasn't it? So yeah, it'll be 116.
There's 6 races plus a sprint.
Close, is it?
It's not close. So 6 races plus a sprint is if we just ignore fastest laps for now, that's 100, 150 plus a sprint, 160. So there's like a sort of 34 points to play with margin, which is the gap Verstappen sort of needs to close down. So not guaranteed at all.
If you've got any more questions, by the way, chat, please do. I'm kind of scrolling through to see if I find this thing about lapped cars, if there's anything going on there. But yeah, please do. If you've got any questions, pop them in. We'll do a couple more minutes and then we will wrap it up. I'm just trying to see if there was something on sites. Let me try. I'm going to search. Don't search lap cars and F1 on Twitter, Sean. You know what's going to happen. I can't see anything.
I think that might have been a little bit of a error.
All I can think of is when the camera cut to the safety car, it picked up Russell. Then it kind of panned back and picked up Verstappen, who was coming up behind them. But then Russell and that were let go, weren't they? So Max was coming up effectively to lap them, but obviously can't overtake under the safety car, if I remember it correctly. And then they were released anyway. So maybe that's where we've got muddled.
Yes, I think that's what's happened. Yeah. I think they were all on the right laps, and I think the timing screens would have said otherwise, if not.
Connor says, will Piastri live up to expectations? I tell you what, next year is going to be fascinating with Piastri, because I think I said this the other week. He's had 2 big teams in F1 fighting over him. He's never turned a wheel. He's going to McLaren up against Lando Norris, who is well settled at that team. It's not going to be a case of, regardless of his talent, walking into that McLaren is not going to be easy. He's going to be under massive pressure. And I actually, potentially controversial opinion, and I don't want to sound like I'm going to go at Esteban Ocon. I think he's had a very good season. But if I'm a rookie and my options are Alpine and McLaren, I'd much rather go up against Ocon than Norris. Honestly. That's not a bias. Norris is just on another level, in my opinion, to Esteban Ocon, and he's been fantastic in that car. And once again, he's the one delivering for McLaren this year. So, I think Piastri would have been much better going to Alpine, where there probably would be a little bit less pressure, where he knew the team knew him, and he's up against a teammate that is, on paper, it sounds awful, but on paper, a little bit more beatable than Norris. Then again, if he hops in the car next year, Stuart, and hands Norris's backside to him, then he's suddenly an absolute superstar, isn't he? So could go either way. But I think it's a lot of pressure next year now.
Yeah, I mean, it's all moot until we see how he does in the car, isn't it? But I tend to agree with what you're saying, and I think particularly Norris has very good pace, but also seems to be very in tune with his car. I think he does seem to be fitting in the team and with the car and making it work for him in ways that, well, we've seen with Ricardo, aren't necessarily guaranteed with whatever it is that McLaren have built. So yeah, it's going to be a trial by fire in that first year, unless McLaren absolutely make a mess of next year's development and are running around like an Alpha, like an Aston Martin or something, and in which case pressure's off. But I think good for him for taking a punt on a brand new team and sitting in next to a well established, excellent driver like Norris, and I'll look forward to that. But again, yeah, it's all speculation until we see it. And I hope after all of the drama that's been caused since August, that he is as good as people make him out to be. Because if all of this chaos has erupted and he just ends up being pretty mediocre once he gets to F1, which does happen sometimes, it would be a bit disappointing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it's probably, for me, it's possibly the most fascinating lineup on the grid next year now. I'm quite looking forward to seeing Alonso versus Stroll. I think that could be quite fun. I don't know why, I just am. But I think we've seen what Russell's done this season. He's exceeded some people's expectations. Some people expected this from him, and I think a couple people said to me at the start of the season that I was sleeping on him. I was wrong. I didn't think he'd get any. I thought Hamilton would not easily beat him, but I thought Hamilton would come out on top. But I don't think anyone expected the Mercedes to be as bad as it was at the start of the season versus what we're used to seeing. I think Sainz and Leclerc is still an exciting lineup, and whoever Ocon gets put with, or whoever gets put with Ocon, that's going to be fascinating. But there's just something about the Norris-Piastri thing, and it probably is what's happened these last few weeks that makes it so intriguing. But you've also got young driver who's proven himself in that McLaren versus young driver who's going to have to try and prove himself in that McLaren. Again, it's a driver that many regard as one of the best young talents on the grid and probably a future world champion. So it's going to be really interesting, but it's the pressure could be massive, and I hope he doesn't end up on a bad run. I hope it works out for him. I really do. But if it doesn't, I was going to say he's only himself to blame, but not really. I still defend Piastri and the Alpine were messing him about. So I feel like you wouldn't you? If your team was messing you about like that and your option was Williams or go and sign something with McLaren, I know what I'm doing. I'm taking a gamble on McLaren and trying to take it to Norris.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen with junior drivers trying to make it into F1 that seats are limited, and if one becomes available and the one you're sort of waiting on is being incredibly flaky, then you take it. If you can get yourself in a Formula One seat, you get yourself in a Formula One seat. I have no qualms at all. And I think, I mean, we have a lot of criticism about Alonso as well, but I think Alonso also felt he was being messed around, so just went for an F1 seat he knew he could get. I think as drivers, you just got to do what you can. And I agree. I think next year McLaren's could be incredibly exciting to watch, and I hope they are both able to keep moving that team forward. It's hard to know what that midfield's going to look like next year, but yeah, I think I'd be interested to see Piastri and maybe De Vries finally get an opportunity to have an entire F1 season, and we can sort of belatedly see what they're made of.
Dylan says could become a Stoffel 2.0. Ouch. Oh, Dylan's
you
just
mean
kicked
world
me right
champion
in my gut.
Stoffel Van Dorn?
Yeah, world champion Stoffel Van Dorn. Full title, please. Oh, you've kicked me in the gut there, Dylan. Aston Martin will have a lot of ex-Red Bull aero folks. Could be their year, says Freeze. I think Aston will take a step forward next year, definitely. And Richard Potts is talking about Woolies pick and mix in the chat. So now I really want Woolies back. You could... They probably pick very quickly. It's turned into a testing stream very quickly, and then we're ending it. But the only problem with pick and mix is you get like a cup, or as it was at Woolies, a bag, and you're like, I'll get a few bits, and then you get to till and it's like, that's £108, please. Like, Christ. It's very easy to spend a lot on pick and mix, even if you're not a greedy git like me. But yeah, Woolies nostalgia. I did not have that on my list of things I'd expect we'd discuss in this stream, but there you go. It's all Richard's fault. I'm blaming Richard and whoever else. A and Richard. Got my eye on you both. Could next year be the last for Perez at Red Bull? Says Jay. We'll do a couple of quick fire ones. He's contracted for 24, isn't he? Is Checo? So
I don't know.
He's got 2 years, but then again, if he doesn't perform, then Helmut Marko doesn't tend to worry too much about contracts, does he? So, yeah. We'll see. Did we get any comments from his manager, Mark Webber? I don't think I saw anything. It says cited canvas. I've not seen anything. If I'm being honest, Zach says I've got my fingers crossed for Piastri. I like staring at his colossal forehead. Is he? What? Right. Forehead. I'm writing it down. Forehead. Piastri. No. I'll have to look at that afterwards now. You've got me thinking, has he? I think Albon will get the Red Bull seat in 2024, says Six. Says Nick. He's not Red Bull driver anymore, is he, Stuart? Those ties are gone now. He's fully Alex Williams Albon, or Chris Albon, as I keep calling him in testing things.
That's exactly who he is. Yeah, he's free to roam as he wishes. He's his own driver at last, free of the bondage of Helmut Marko.
Of course, doesn't mean he won't go back to Red Bull, does it? Perez wasn't a Red Bull youngster. And he's still got there, so you never know. And I think we are going to leave it there because I think we're done. This is going to sound really weird. Before the season started, I had dreamt that De Vries would be in the Williams instead of Albon, says Elian. Elian? If I butchered that, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there then, Stuart. Just check out on my super chats. Yes, I have. Thank you so much. It's been lovely. Three races in a row, back to back to back, and then nothing for basically 3 weeks, which sucks. But maybe this will be when silly season all resolves itself in this 2-week gap when teams have got a bit more time to think about it.
Kimi Räikkönen returns.
Oh, God. Don't set the Räikkönen fans off. But yeah, it's been a pleasure as always. Good race, and hopefully, whilst the championships are done, hopefully we'll get some really great racing between now and the checkered flag in Abu Dhabi. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
This is it. We're in the end game now. Thanks for having me. Been great to chat.
Yeah, it has, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Ta-ra.
Thank you to Stuart. Thank you to you guys as well in chat. Yeah, 52 more likes to go. Just shy of 700 still here. Let's see if we can get that up to 500 just while I sign up. 52 likes to go. That would be massive. Please stop talking about pick and mix, Richard. I'm going to have to go and get me some pick and mix now, but I don't know where does it. Tesco. Ugh, that's not the same as Woolies. That's not been mauled by people all day. Ugh, not the same. Anyway, I will be back. Obviously, I'll do the preview for Singapore and the race reaction for Singapore. There will be content out in the meantime as well. I will try and hop back on F1 Manager as well. Do a stream or two over the next couple of weeks with that one while we've got no F1. I think that's definitely a plan. There'll be something that I've not done my driver lineup predictions yet, so let me know in the comments down below afterwards or in the chat now if you want me to do them, or is it sort of pointless now that we know what half the grid's going to be? I don't know. We shall see. But I'm not going to disappear. I will have content out. You can follow me on social media as well. All the links you need for that are in the description down below. And like I say, don't forget to drop a like and please subscribe as well so you don't miss out on any future content or streams or videos, which are all content. So I don't know why I said that, but I'm just going to sign off now. As ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.